Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Today we're going to talk about something very important, and this is the concept of the ANTAHKARANA. Translated into English, that means the inner tool. Now, essentially, what this actually is, conceptually, is the mind. This is what we refer to as the mind. Now, most people don't understand that the mind is actually something that operates on multiple levels. So it's not just this abstract thing that we call mind. Mind operates on levels. And when the old quote that goes "Know thyself" is actually stated, it's a challenge. Not so much of a challenge that like a competition, but this states the mission that needs to be accomplished. Know thyself. Well, how do you know thyself unless you study thyself? So that's the point of this whole thing that we've got going on here. I've been going live a lot because I believe from my experience and from whatever higher knowledge that's going on that this information is crucial. And to understand this information is key if what you want is spiritual growth, spiritual evolution, and to transcend beyond the levels of limited humanity. So today we're going to go over ANTAHKARANA, which means inner tool. And I believe that if you do some research yourself, if you listen to what's being said, you're going to start to make a bit more sense of your experience, because mind is much more than just how you think and what you think. There's levels to it, and there are aspects that are contributing to its creation, right? So the first book that we're reading for the study group is The Passive Poverty and Nivriti. The key word is vritti, and vritti translates to mental modifications. And these are ripples in the stillness of your mind. When these ripples are created, these are what cause us to run towards them or run away from them, pleasure and pain and that sort of thing. So today we're going to get into all that. I believe you guys are going to enjoy it. We're going to read from two books. One of them is Tatwa Shuddhi because she wrote an entire chapter about the ANTAHKARANA. And the other one is from Awakening the Life Force, which a lot of people don't have because it's out of print. So, thank you for joining me tonight. Greetings, Illusionist. Greetings, Sirius Suit 888. Bizarre Cultivations. Greetings, greetings. Cradle of Humankind. Welcome back. Who loves orange soda? I do. Peace, peace, brother. Moby, always great to see your name. Shango, peace and power, my brother. Sunshine Chick, good evening and welcome, welcome. YouTubely, good evening. Arsonist Fire, peace, peace. So yeah, let's get started. DIE, welcome, welcome. Okay, so Sankofa Sound, greetings, bro. Welcome to this Magus Academy where every day is self-study. Because what else are you going to be doing with your time? Getting wrapped up in celebrity nonsense, getting wrapped up in politics and government, getting wrapped up in drama, getting wrapped up in all kind of transient humanity that doesn't add to your growth whatsoever. That's assuming that what you want is growth. Everybody doesn't want growth. Some people prefer to stay where they are, and that's fine. That's what their ANTAHKARANA is directed at. But I believe that those of us who gravitate towards this information, we want growth. We want to see growth. We want to see evolution. So that's what we got going on here today. So what I'm going to start with is a Wikipedia definition of ANTAHKARANA. If you notice what I had on the thumbnail, that's actually the symbol, the logo for ANTAHKARANA. Pretty interesting symbol there, if I do say so myself. But let's go to see what the Wikipedia definition of the ANTAHKARANA translates to. Let's see. Okay, so flip the camera around. That's not Wikipedia. This is Wikipedia. Okay, so ANTAHKARANA, Sanskrit, meaning the inner organ or inner instrument. Okay, it's a concept in Hindu philosophy referring to the totality of two levels of mind, namely the Buddhi, or the intellect or higher mind, and Manas, the middle levels of mind, which, according to theosophy, exist as or include the mental body. ANTAHKARANA has also been called the link between the middle and higher mind, the reincarnating part of the mind. So in Vedantic literature, this ANTAHKARANA, or internal organ, is organized into 4 parts. Okay, remember I asked you guys to write this down and study it not long ago. If you haven't done that, then you probably see why, because this is actually a very important concept that should be understood if know thyself is one of your primary goals and objectives. So here you have another chance to write this down. Let's see what Wikipedia says about this. Wikipedia says it's organized into 4 parts. The first is Ahamkara, which is ego, and that identifies the Atman, or the self, with the body as I. So Ahamkara, or ego, is that which identifies the Atman with the body. It identifies the self with the I. It identifies your soul with your physical incarnation, right? That's why ego presents an issue, because ego is the thing that identifies your God self, your soul, with your physical body. Okay. Buddhi, which is intellect, it controls the decision making. Manas, which is mind, controls sankalpa, or your will or your resolution. Chitta, or memory, deals with remembering and forgetting. Okay. So again, I mentioned this a few nights ago. Since this is Sanskrit, and it's actually very the definitions and the concepts here are actually very wide. So it's not just like one size fits all definition. These are rather pointers or direction markers that kind of give you an idea of what the words represent. Okay, so you're going to see slightly different definitions for these, but just get an idea of what they mean. Okay, so generally, Ahamkara means ego. Generally, Buddhi means intellect. Generally, Manas means mind. And generally, Chitta means memory. Okay, so another description says that ANTAHKARANA refers to the entire psychological process, including mind and emotions, are composing the mind levels as described above, which are mentioned as a unit that functions with all parts working together as a whole. Furthermore, when considering that mind levels are bodies, they are manomaya kosha, related to manas, the part of the mind related to the 5 senses, and also craving for new and pleasant sensations and emotions. While buddhi, intellect, capacity to reason, is related to vijnanamaya kosha, the body of consciousness, knowledge, intuition, and experience. ANTAHKARANA also refers to a symbol used in Reiki healing method. So what they said right here is, those of you who studied Sanskrit, those of you who've taken my course, and those of you who know a little bit about this, know that there are 5 bodies that you are generally composed of. And the manomaya kosha, which is the lower level, is related to manas, right? And the vijnanamaya kosha, which is known as the mental body, that's related to the buddhi. All right. So just to give you a small visual here, a slight visual, the koshas, the sheaths, right? Here's just an example of how it's operated. You see the soul there in the center, right? And then it's interesting. Somebody messaged me this morning or yesterday, and they were asking me about God. They're asking me about how I feel about God in relation to people. And basically, I said that we know how a pearl is made, that a piece of sand makes its way into an oyster's mouth or clam's mouth, and that piece of sand irritates the oyster. So what it does is it secretes a certain chemical, whatever, that coats that grain of sand, and it builds layers and layers and layers until that grain of sand becomes a smooth pearl, right? And over time, those layers begin to harden and harden, and the sand is at the center of a new thing. That's exactly what happens with existence. When consciousness, which is God, when ultimate consciousness, like pure, undifferentiated ultimate consciousness, comes into contact with matter, which is like the oyster, it begins to create change. It begins to create vibrations. It begins to create fluctuations in matter, not consciousness. Consciousness doesn't change at all. That grain of sand is always there. But matter changes around consciousness. It begins to form vibrations and waves. And what happens is what we call sin or impurity is when consciousness begins to identify with the pearl. When the grain of sand thinks it's a pearl now, right? That's consciousness thinking that it's matter. So most of us, we grow up and we're not taught anything about reality. So we believe that we're our body and we live and we die and repeat the process, never getting to know the soul. And it takes multiple lifetimes to come to that realization. So what we're doing now with this art and science of know thyself is undoing those layers, or rather realizing that these are layers and not the self. Because remember what Wikipedia said, it said that Ahamkara or ego identifies the Atman, or that grain of sand, with the body or the pearl. So I said all that to bring some context to this image here, right? Diagram of how the self looks, how the composition looks. That soul in the center, that grain of sand, right? Now it's surrounded by layers, right? The first layer is Anandamaya kosha, and that's the causal body. The next body is Vijnanamaya kosha, and that's the mental body. And as we saw, that was related to Buddhi. Then around the Vijnanamaya kosha is the Manomaya kosha, and that's what they said was related to Manas. And then Pranamaya kosha, that's your pranic body, your etheric body, and then finally Anamaya kosha, that's your physical body, right? So it's not that your soul is inside of your body like that, but vibrationally, the outer layer vibrates slower, denser, thicker. So it would seem that as you rise the levels, the vibrations are finer and faster, and it almost gives an image of being inside. But when we say inside, it's not physically inside, it's more like behind, more like projecting, right? Just like that. Okay, so the reason that I'm showing all this is because this is the origin of where this information came from, right? Everything that came after that built upon what was already taught here. If you research enough, you'll begin to see that all of this knowledge points back to the same source, right? Even Buddhism comes up out of this philosophy, which is called Samkhya. All right, so go ahead and like this video if this is information that you're interested in. Like this video if you want me to keep doing this kind of thing, because I certainly enjoy doing this. If you want to see more of it, then like the video. That's how YouTube lets itself know that this content is worth watching and enjoying. I already know it is, and you guys know it is. So help YouTube and her algorithm understand what time it is. All right. So for those of you who have taught with Shruti, that's the first book I'm going to be reading from. Flip the camera around here. Reading from Taught with Shruti, and this is going to be chapter 7. Chapter 7. Take a look at that logo for ANTAHKARANA. Pretty interesting, huh? I love it. Chapter 7, ANTAHKARANA. I like to search and research for truth. So I spend a lot of time studying this stuff. So hopefully you guys can get a glimpse as to why I spend so much time with this stuff, because it's hella interesting. Like there's no TV show or comic book or video game or movie that's more interesting than what's really going on. A lot of people are like, oh, you gotta watch this TV show, it's dropping gems, or oh, you gotta watch this movie because they said this or that. But it's like, what? Why when I can just read where the stuff comes from in the first place, you know? So, let's get started. Nuru, peace and greetings. Okay, chapter 7, ANTAHKARANA. ANTAHKARANA is a combination of two Sanskrit words. Anta is inner, and Karana is tool or instrument. ANTAHKARANA is thus the inner tool or instrument of man. It is comprised of four faculties: Buddhi, which is intellect; Ahamkara, ego; Manas, thought or counter thought; and chitta, memory. According to Tantra and Yoga, these four principles constitute the medium through which the consciousness acts. Okay, so this inner tool is actually the medium through which consciousness acts. Got it? Let's continue. ANTAHKARANA distinguishes human beings from the plant, animal, and mineral kingdoms. Right? In these lower forms of life, ANTAHKARANA exists in a dormant and tamasic seed state. Remember, we talked about tamas, right? Tamas is one of the three gunas, which is rajas, sattva, and tamas. And this is represented pictorially by the trident. So you'll see a lot of Indian and Vedic deities holding a trident that represents their mastery over the three gunas, which again are sattva, rajas, and tamas. So in these lower forms of life, the ANTAHKARANA exists in a dormant and tamasic seed state. These creations of nature do not operate from the level of intellect, discrimination, thought, or ego. Remember, intellect, discrimination, thought, or ego, but from the level of pure instinct, right? So animals and plants, they operate at a level of pure instinct. They don't have this inner tool. For example, a dog will instinctively prefer meat to vegetables. He does not consciously discriminate one from the other. It is a natural instinctive process which governs his body. I remember on some talk show there was this lady who was like, yeah, I trained my dog to be vegan, and like she brought the dog on the show and they were going to prove it, and they put a plate of vegetables and a plate of meat, and you know, clearly the dog ran to the plate of meat without hesitation whatsoever. You don't train a dog to be vegan. That's not how it works. But anyways, he does not consciously discriminate one from the other. It is a natural instinctive process which governs his body. That's one of the things that separates the animal kingdom from the human kingdom, right? Natural instinctive process which governs his body. Animal nature, it's that natural instinctive process. So when we talk about things like the herd mentality, when we talk about things like the survival mentality, like this lower nature, the lower three chakras, that animal nature, natural instinct, yes, we all have it. But for something to be stuck from that space and operate purely from that space, that's what distinguishes an animal from a human being. Okay? However, in this case of man, this faculty has gradually evolved to its present capacity. Man has emerged victorious over all other forms of life by the strength of his inner faculty, which has given him the power to reason, think, plan, remember, and enact. However, the intellectual supremacy of man does not in any way complement the full potential of the ANTAHKARANA. All right, I'll read that again. The intellectual supremacy of man, right? It's not how smart you think you are. The intellectual supremacy of man does not in any way complement the full potential of the ANTAHKARANA. It is just a mere glimpse of the power that it contains. If the performance of this instrument reaches its full capacity, man can not only control the inferior creations of nature, but also the latent forces within himself, which have the inherent power to create, preserve, and destroy. So what she said right there with the create, preserve, and destroy, that's another hint towards the gunas. And essentially what she's saying is you will be able to master the material plane, right? We might go into this in another video, but the material plane and all that has manifested matter in creation, that's known as prakriti. And she is composed of these three gunas, again, which are rajas, tamas, and sattva: generator, operator, destroyer, create, preserve, destroy. So that's a hint towards those three gunas. Basically what she's saying here is it's not just how smart you think you are, it's not the stuff that you learn and memorize, but the inner tool is actually much more powerful than this. And she says that once the performance of this inner instrument reaches its full capacity, man can not only control the inferior creations of nature, right? So you not only control the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, and nature herself, but you also will be able to control the latent forces within himself, which have the inherent power. Get this now. The latent forces within yourself, those subtle bodies, the mental body, the etheric body, the physical body, the astral body, the causal body, those inner forces within yourself have the inherent power to create, preserve, and destroy, right? Generator, operator, destroyer. So once you're able to master this inner tool that I'm talking about here, the more that you master this thing, it's not something that you just tell people you're doing. It's demonstrated by the proof. The more control that you have over your reality, the more conscious, intentional control that you have over your reality, right? It's demonstrated. You start to have more and more balance, more and more purity, more and more harmony, right? That's what is the indicator that you're beginning to have more and more control over this inner tool. So, the consciousness of man acting through the ANTAHKARANA interprets, classifies, conjectures, perceives, and cognizes all data related to the past, present, and future experiences. Everything you feel, see, do, or speak is a part of what is stored there. There is a part of ANTAHKARANA that has knowledge not only of this life and experiences related to it, but knowledge of the whole universe and cosmos. Powerful stuff, powerful stuff. Framestar Films asks, and greetings, Framestar Films. Hi, Trev. Would you consider that these four levels of consciousness correlate with the four elements: fire, intellect, water, memory, etc.? Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why there are four. Absolutely. So, mastering these also essentially is you mastering the four elements of creation. All this stuff is related. That's what makes it so beautiful. And like I said last night, you got people like throwing in wild new stuff, like, oh, we just discovered a new this and a new that. No, the way that you can know and tell and understand that you're working within a system is that everything is symbolic and everything connects and makes sense with itself. So absolutely, these four aspects of mind do represent the four elements, the four tattvas. And again, what she's kind of saying is when you're able to master these four, 1, 2, 3, 4, you inherently master the fifth. And I brought these out to also just show about these gunas, the modes of nature, right? And I keep saying generator, operator, destroyer. We talk about rajas, which is activity, right? Generator. Sattva, which is goodness and balance. Operator. Destroyer. Tamas, ignorance, right? Another way to look at this thing, rajas, which represents generation. See how it says that at the very bottom? Generation, rajas, the creator, right? Next up is sattva, right? Sattva, the maintainer, right? Organization. It even spells it out here because they know what time it is also. God, generation, organization, and then finally destruction, right? That's God. And then Tamas here being the destroyer and the transformer. These are the three ingredients that make up the material plane, the physical plane, prakriti, right? These are the three ingredients, the three modes that her energy flows as, right? Generation, organization, and destruction. And what Swami Satchisangananda is saying here in this book is that when you are able to fully bring your inner instrument to its full capacity, you begin to wield that power. So again, whenever you see these Vedic deities or the Indian deities holding a trident, or how the Europeans translated it to a pitchfork, whenever you see that trident, that represents an energy that has mastered the physical plane, that has mastered the skill and the art of generation, organization, and destruction. We haven't mastered that. That's why we are under the effect of it, and we can't help ourselves, right? We're tossed and turned. But an entity that has mastered that, for example, let's look here at the entity that is presented in this particular book, which is Prana Shakti. I don't remember what page that she's on, but even she is depicted holding a trident. Hold on, getting there. Just a second. There she is. So yeah, in one of her hands is shown that she's holding the trident, right? And clearly what that represents is that generation, operation, destruction. And what we strive for in this science is to get through that middle path, right, of organization, of sattva. Because it is only through that sattvic path that we can transcend the material nature. You can't transcend the material nature if you're under a rajasic energy or a tamasic energy, because one is too wild and too active, and one is heading towards death and decay. Only when it comes to sattva and balance can we hope to transcend and ascend. Okay. So let's continue. Greetings, Cheryl Brown. And yes, illusionist, Poseidon would fall up under that category as well, especially when you think about what it is that Poseidon represents. Remember to look at these entities symbolically, because they're not actual people somewhere, being big and mighty. They're concepts that represent certain things. Okay, so let's continue. Greetings, Stray Panther. All right, so yeah, again, the consciousness of man acting through the Antakarana interprets, classifies, conjectures, perceives, and cognizes all data related to the past, present, and future experiences. So everything you feel, see, do, or speak is a part of what is stored there in your Antakarana. There's a part of the Antakarana that has knowledge not only of this life and experiences related to it, but knowledge of the whole universe and cosmos. Within your Antakarana are memories and knowledge of your previous incarnations and your future incarnations. And this is why we have what people call magic and spirituality, because they're starting to tap into this, right? Everything is composed of the same material, and that same material exists in different layers. Just like if you let a soup, or if you let milk sit in the fridge too long and it gets old and chunky, it separates, right? Some parts go to the bottom and some go to the top, and you can see layers. So reality is like that. Now, the higher up you go, the less dense you get, the more fine and subtle you get. Time ceases to exist, so everything exists at once. And if you're able to refine your consciousness, you can begin to access those aspects as well. And people talk about being able to see the future, have visions, and all this other stuff. That's why, because you're starting to tap into a subtle aspect of the same reality that we're all tapped into. Let's continue. However, due to the grossness of one's awareness, the full potential of knowledge remains dormant and unmanifested, and it will remain this way unless one begins to refine the Antakarana. That's really important. Thank you all, Brazil. I appreciate you. So check this out. Just like what I was saying about past, present, future, and the subtle states of existence, it surrounds us all at all times. You're not ever separated from it. It's just your awareness is so focused on your five sense experience that you don't cognize it. So you have to refine this inner tool to be able to perceive the subtle aspects of reality. So check this out. I highlighted this part. She says, refinement of Antakarana implies tuning it to the high frequencies of pure energy and consciousness, so that we become aware that, in fact, what we are refining is a creation of that same energy and consciousness. Right? How important is that? When you refine this inner tool that we're talking about here, when you refine what we call our mind, when you refine this tool, it's like tuning it, right? We're tuning it to the higher frequencies of pure energy and consciousness. And check this out. We are created of pure energy and consciousness. Remember I talked about the grain of sand that made its way into the oyster's mouth. The grain of sand is consciousness. The oyster and the shell and everything else is pure energy. So when consciousness comes into contact with energy, it creates a manifestation. And that's our experience, right? So everything that you can experience is made out of the same stuff. Now, when you refine your inner tool, you're tuning yourself to the more purified aspect of pure energy and consciousness, so that you become aware of, in fact, what we are refining, right? The inner tool that we are actually refining is a creation of that same energy and consciousness. So you start to see more and more of the subtle aspect of what you are, and you begin to realize that what you are is the same thing as what God is, right? You start to realize that you're the same thing. Peace, Marco, power. The physical evolution of man today stands complete, right? The physical evolution of man today stands complete. We're not going to physically evolve anymore. He may grow shorter or taller, fatter or thinner, but the next stage of evolution belongs to the realm of consciousness. So evolution is not taking place in the physical plane anymore. It's now taking place in the realm of consciousness, as it always has been. Sri Aurobindo talks about a superhuman race when man has achieved this state of higher mind. Superhuman race is a term which implies mental, emotional, rational, and above all, spiritual development of man at its zenith. It presents these faculties in us. At present, these faculties in us are only at the teething stage, and we are still grappling with their complexities. Much of the success we can have in this area depends on our ability to purify, illumine, and unify the functions of the ANTAHKARANA. Right? So much of the success we can have in the area of evolution, right? It all depends on our ability to purify, illuminate, and unify the functions of the ANTAHKARANA. This is why this is so important to understand. This is why it's so important to understand. When they say know thyself, this is what we're talking about. Know what you're made of. Know your ingredients, your structure, your context. Understand what it is that makes you what you are. If you don't know that, then what kind of work can you do, right? Peace and greetings, Connor Black. Peace, peace. That superhuman race kind of sounds like Satyuga. Yes, yes. And we've been there before, and we're gonna go back to it. It's a repeating cycle, right? Okay, so much of our success depends on the refinement and the purification and illumination of our inner tool. The ANTAHKARANA acts like a very fine transmitter which receives and transmits impressions. Thoughts do not originate in the human body. They're received and they're transmitted. We talked last night in our reading of The Paths of Poverty and Nivriti, second chapter. We talked about how these waves and these frequencies and this energy is received by the mind, and the mind translates it into words, translates it into thoughts, and the thoughts become words, right? And you have the very real ability to sit down and filter those frequencies so that they come out the way that you intend them to come out, as opposed to just popping off at the mouth and not having any control over what you say. Let's keep going. Marco Power says Jimi Hendrix had an album called The Rainbow Bridge, which referred to the ANTAHKARANA. Interesting. I've never heard that. What's up? Peace. Okay, so the ANTAHKARANA acts like a very fine transmitter which receives and transmits impressions. The clarity and precision with which it performs this act depends entirely on how refined your instrument has become. Okay, so the clarity and the precision with which it performs this act of receiving and transmitting these fine impressions depends entirely on how refined your instrument has become. If it is tuned to the gross vibrations, then that is what the transmitter will reflect. That's powerful. If your inner tool is tuned to the gross vibrations, then that is what the transmitter will reflect. You're receiving frequencies all the time. But if your transmitter is dense and basic, that's all that you can display is density and basicness. Now check it out. All of this is related. Remember, we went through power and force, and we talked about the different levels of consciousness, right? We talked about the different levels that the human being can experience. And depending on what level you're stuck at, what level that you're viewing reality through, that's all that you can process. That's all that your transmitter will reflect. Remember how we talked about these levels here, and these lower levels, notice the arrows pointing downwards, they're self-destructive. And this is where most people find themselves, right? Shame. Someone whose transmitter is tuned into the shame frequency, no matter what they receive, that's all they're going to be able to see. Guilt. No matter what they receive, they're going to see God as vindictive. They're going to see life as evil. Their main emotion is going to be blame. Their process of reality is destruction. And that's tamasic. Remember we talked about the three gunas. That's tamasic. So depending on, when we talk about the ANTAHKARANA and the inner tool, and she's talking about tuning it, all these levels are like radio stations. And depending on what you're tuned into most of the time, that's how you process reality. That's why all this stuff is so important to understand, guys. This isn't just random knowledge that you can talk about at a party. Like, this is how you change your life, understanding these concepts and working with them. All of this is useful information. So depending on what level that your transmitter is tuned into, whatever you're going to receive is going to come through these filters. Fear. People who are stuck in the fear state, right? We can talk about, and I've seen it, in my comments and stuff, where I'll be talking about stuff, like I'll say something like there are no enemies, or my perspective on reality, and then someone will come with their perspective about how we should be afraid of things and how we've got to fight back and we've got to protect ourselves. That's coming from a person who is stuck at a specific level that sees reality like that. You see what I'm saying? Goodness gracious. Rai Dawson, peace and greetings. Momo Kase, greetings. Tian Pomeroy, good evening. All right, let's keep going. Greetings, Hikate. Good to see you. All right, so like the last sentence I just said, depending on how your instrument is tuned, no matter what you receive, it's going to be filtered through the level of reality that you are currently able to accept. So again, it doesn't make much use to try to pin somebody down and force them to listen to you talk about spirituality if they're not able to receive and translate those vibrations. You feel me? Thank you, Sunshine Chick. I appreciate that. I don't know who these people are, where they're coming from, but thank you. Okay, so, however, if it is tuned to the subtleties of cosmic vibration, then not only can you discover the underlying mysteries behind your own existence, but also the enigma which is underlying the whole cosmos. Man is not a separate entity. Understand that. You are not a separate entity from the reality you live in. As a matter of fact, there is only two realities, and that's the internal and the external. The external reality is your environment. And guess what? Your physical body is part of the environment, right? Even down to the air that you breathe that's circulating through your room and your house all the time, especially if you don't go outside, you don't open your windows, right? The food that's in your fridge will eventually at some point become a part of this body. The water in your bottles, or if you drink out the faucet, the water in your pipes, that's going to become a part of your body, right? The phone is going to send you frequencies and vibrations that are going to become a part of your body. So your environment and you, it's one and the same, right? Man is not a separate entity suspended between cause and event. You're not a separate entity suspended between cause and event. Rather, he is an integral part of the cosmic plan that has a role for each and every speck of creation. There's a role for everything. The ANTAHKARANA plays a vital part in our pursuit to understand this role. Never too much, never too much. This infinitely subtle instrument is what we ourselves have built through our fine sense of imagery during our journey through many successive incarnations, right? Thus, the ANTAHKARANA contains the impressions which we carry lifetime after lifetime. Like a musical instrument, the ANTAHKARANA is sensitive enough to pick up the subtlest vibrations, which it continues to do, irrespective of our conscious knowledge. The 2 points to consider here. The first is about reincarnation. A lot of people talk about reincarnation, and as usual with most things, most people don't know what they're talking about. They say, oh, well, I don't mean to hurt any feelings or nothing like that, but what reincarnates is not this whole thing. There's a very subtle part of you that reincarnates, not your looks and your face. You don't, it's not dependent on your bloodline or your family or your race or none of that external stuff. It's dependent on what frequency you are vibrating at for the most part of your life. You're going to come back into that same frequency unless you move yourself. So you can start deteriorating and going back downward to the animal kingdom, or you can start going upward to where you're put into a situation of life where you're able to make your way out. There will always be groups of people talking about this, the science, right? There's always going to be mystery schools. There's always going to be people talking about this truth. It's never going to be lost, ever, because there will always be certain people who are at that frequency who are ready to graduate from the human existence. So don't worry about this information being lost or somebody corrupting it, or don't worry about none of that, right? This stuff is much more intricate and deep than your experience. But when it comes to reincarnation and stuff like that, it's not the physical body and it's not your memories and your personality. It's the deeper part of yourself, right? We're talking about this ANTAHKARANA. That's what reincarnates until you begin to balance it, harmonize it, and attune it to where it is sattvic, not rajasic or tamasic. Okay. The second part is, look at what she says here. Like a musical instrument, the ANTAHKARANA is sensitive enough. It's a sensitive thing, guys. It's more sensitive than you realize. It's a sensitive enough to up the subtlest vibrations, which it continues to do irrespective of our conscious knowledge. That means when you're asleep, that means when you're daydreaming, when you're watching TV, when you're scrolling through social media, when you're using the bathroom, your ANTAHKARANA is always picking up data, which means that data, if you're not aware, will begin to change your experience, right? When you say that you suddenly start feeling depressed, or you suddenly start feeling anxious, or you suddenly have a craving for something, or you suddenly, That means that your Antakarana, your inner tool, has picked up some frequency, some vibration, something that triggered a craving or a pain within you. You don't have to be conscious of it, right? A lot of people think that I'm strong enough to handle XYZ, but even if you're aware of what's being transmitted, it's still affecting you. That's why personally, I don't really watch the news. I don't really watch TV or a lot of this stuff, because even if you're aware of the mental manipulation and the mind control and the commercials, even if you're aware of it, it still has an effect on you. Doesn't matter if you know what I'm saying, if you think that you're stronger than it always has an effect. That's why you've got to be cautious of what you allow into your experience. I'm not saying be afraid. I'm saying choose on purpose what you want to be a part of your reality. Because like she just said, you're not separate from the universe. You're not separate from your environment. Your body is the environment. So what you've got in your environment is you, right? It is you. Very important. It's not just the food you eat. It's also the people that you associate with. It's also the words that you say and that you allow to bounce around into your head, music you listen to, all of it. It's so important to be aware and to have intention with what you're doing. So important. And so, peace. Illusionist says, Travis, what do you think of this? I get sad and anxiety whenever I see some people, even though nothing bad happened between me and them. So it's not always just them. There's something around when you see them, it triggers a vritti. It triggers something in you. Something symbolic is represented, and that trigger is happening, and it's attached to those negative feelings. It's not always those people. We are all symbols of experience. This unicorn is a symbol of an experience. So when I see it, it's going to trigger something. It's not a conscious thing. Likewise, even if you had an experience with a certain type of person, whenever you see someone that looks like them, you're still being triggered, right? If you were bullied, I used this example a long ass time ago. If you were bullied by, someone who is of Asian descent, and that's like the only Asian person you've ever known, every time you see a person that looks like him, you're going to be triggering that memory. Good stuff. Ry Dawson asks, what's the source of random pains, twitches? This gives me a lot of concern because I don't know what they mean. So it could be a lot of different sources. The body itself has its own mind, and it is trying to communicate with us all the time. And some of those pains, twinges, and twitches are its form of communication. It's trying to tell you something. Now, that's way too general to give like a solid answer, but it may be worth taking some time to pay close attention to what triggers those feelings and what happens around the time frame of when they happen. Woo got it, peace. All right, let's continue. So again, like a musical instrument, the Antakarana is sensitive enough to pick up the subtlest vibrations, which it continues to do, irrespective of our conscious knowledge. Super important to be aware of what's in your environment and to utilize whatever control you have over being intentional with what you have in your life. You may not be consciously aware of certain impressions that are forming within you, but your Antakarana keeps vigil at all times, right? Even when you're asleep, it doesn't shut off. It doesn't stop. It's always there, always there. It is your Antakarana that decides your course of action, depending on past experience or knowledge. What is recorded there may never reveal itself to you, right? Unless the clarity of cosmic awareness and the inner ear and eye, which can comprehend the subtle vibrations of cosmic sound and vision, are attained. So you've got to do the work and the practice to start to develop your awareness and clarity of your inner ear, which is clairaudience, and your inner eye, which is clairvoyance. This is how you can see and deal with this inner tool, right? Because it's through the inner ear and the inner eye that you're able to comprehend the subtle vibrations of cosmic sound and cosmic vision. A lot of people who have never had any type of mystical experience, they think that they're going to have this mystical experience with their physical eyes and their physical ears, right? Because they watched a lot of Marvel Universe TV shows and movies and a lot of Harry Potter or whatever. It's not going to come from, that's not where it comes from, right? Mystical experiences, this happens with the inner vision and the inner ear. Now, of course, it can manifest on the physical plane, yes. But if that's your only criteria for spirituality, you're going to be disappointed frequently, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, well, how do you summon these demons in physical form? Like, that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. These things are extremely subtle. They exist on a subtle plane. You can see their effect, just like you can't look at the wind, but you see the effect of the wind, right? Just because you don't see the wind doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But it's not something that is dense and material, although it has an effect on the dense material. Likewise, when it comes to the astral plane or working with spirits or any of that stuff, you have to develop your inner eye and your inner ear to be able to perceive these things. And the more clear you get with the development of your inner eye and your inner ear, the deeper you're going to be able to go into ultimate reality. Unless you start developing these things, you're not going to get very deep. That's why I keep saying, like, people who claim to be doing all this astral stuff, they're not really doing astral stuff. They're still on the etheric plane, right? Unless you're really doing the meditations to develop your inner ear and your inner eye, you're not going very far, because past this, there isn't much form. There isn't much form. So unless you've really developed your inner senses, you're not going to be able to perceive anything, right? Right, Dawson asks, is the best way to practice clair just sitting and noticing inner phenomena? That's a good way to do it. Paying attention, just being aware of what's going on. That's the best way to start. Because this is an inner equipment, so it's not going to be anything external that you're doing. This is all going to be an inner experience. Thank you, Enso. Thank you, Rye Dawson. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Connor Black says, yoga gives you the clarity to see your real self. Unless you see that, it's hard to correctly interpret what you receive. Exactly. Exactly. You have to clean your glass. You have to clean your lens. Otherwise, what you're receiving is going to be tainted and corrupted by your attachments, your emotional attachments, and your vrittis. So let's keep going, because this stuff is really important. Okay, so we like to say our subconscious mind is always paying attention, but it's deeper than just that. You got these 4 different aspects of self. And like it says here, you may not be consciously aware of certain impressions that are forming within you, but your Antakarana keeps vigil at all times. It is your Antakarana that decides your course of action, depending on past experience or knowledge. What is recorded there may never reveal itself to you, unless the clarity of cosmic awareness in the inner eye, inner ear, and inner eye, which can comprehend the subtle vibrations of cosmic sound and vision, are attained. Therefore, we have not only to discover what is stored in the Antakarana, but also learn how to control it, right? Tantra is the only science which has given us the answer, right? Antakarana is the tool through which consciousness is playing its cosmic game, or lila. Consciousness is the same in everyone, pure, effulgent, and radiant. How it expresses itself depends on the precision, clarity, and perception of the medium through which it plays its game. The medium through which it plays its game is the Antakarana. So what she's saying here is how consciousness or God or the highest aspect, how consciousness expresses itself depends on the precision, clarity, and perception of the Antakarana through which consciousness is playing its game. Matthew Watson, peace. The same idea, the same thought, the same action may occur in two different people, but the interpretation, enactment, and culminating results will depend entirely on the level of mind, intellect, and ego of the persons. Dimensions of the mind. In yoga, the mind is classified into four stages: Jagrati, which is conscious; Swapna, which is subconscious; Sushupti, which is unconscious; and Turaya, which is transcendental. These are the four levels of mind right here. Your conscious, your subconscious, your unconscious, and your transcendental. Thus, yoga speaks of the fourfold mind as opposed to modern psychology, which has limited itself to just three forms of awareness: conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. That's one of the downsides and limitations of Western civilization, because they're extremely surface level. They only focus on what can be seen with the eyes, touched with the hands, and heard with the ears. They only focus on the surface level. So anything that cannot be observed directly like that, they don't classify it as real. So because of that, we're missing like a whole chunk of understanding. We don't go deep. That's why we have to go back to the East to reclaim what was lost. So even in psychology, they do talk about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious, but they don't acknowledge the transcendental mind, because it's very difficult to observe and analyze the transcendental mind with surface level tools and techniques. The Antakarana functions through the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious realms, creating gross, subtle, and causal experiences. As the Antakarana has evolved out of a combination of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, the quality of experience is largely determined by the pervading influence of these cosmic principles. So again, as the Antakarana has evolved out of a combination of the three gunas, and there's those three gunas again, I keep mentioning them and I keep going back over them because you're going to see this pop up over and over and over and over again. Generator, operator, destroyer. Rajas is passion. Sattva is goodness and harmony. Tamas is ignorance and stupidity and decay, gravity, right? These are the three. See how it's egg-shaped? These are the three ingredients that create the manifested dimension. Not just the physical plane, but also the astral plane, the etheric plane, the mental plane, the spiritual plane. It's all layers, but they're composed of these three ingredients: up, down, and balance. And that's also what the trident represents. Okay? And that is also why you see, right? That's also, keep in mind, the yoga of the West. That's also why you see these three pillars on this tree. Right? Notice how this all connects. The sattvic path. In yoga, the sattvic path is the only way to transcend the mind and the human experience. Rajas and tamas, right? Positive and negative, right? Generator, operator, destroyer. All this stuff is connected. And if it don't connect, then it's not real. What did Bobby Hemmett say? Show me where it is in the ancient text. You feel me? Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Yeah, so we talked about these four levels of mind. And we also talked about how as the Antakarana has evolved out of a combination of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, the quality of experience is largely determined by the pervading influence of these cosmic principles. All right. Here's the Antakarana: Buddhi, Ahamkara, Chitta, Manas. Manas, Chitta, Buddhi, and Ahamkara behave differently under the sway of sattva as opposed to rajas and tamas, and thus manifest differently in the three states of awareness. So now we start getting a little bit more complex. That's why I asked you guys to memorize those first four, and that's why I keep repeating these three, right? Because each of these four different aspects will behave differently when they're under the influence of one of these three ingredients, right? So manas can operate under rajas, which will be very passionate, very excited, very active, or it can be under the influence of tamas, which is very slow, stubborn, deaf, dumb, blind, stupid. Or it can be under the influence of sattva, which is very harmonious, peaceful, and balanced. And like I said, evidence that you're improving and evolving is that you'll start to manifest sattvic qualities: peaceful, universal, harmonious, equilibrium, wise, refined, good. And if you look at the chart that is on power versus force, right? Because all the stuff is connected. I'll keep saying that because I can prove it and back it up through evidence and through your experience. You'll notice that the lower levels of this chart are very tamasic, right? Notice how they're all pointing downward, tamasic. It isn't until you get to this courage aspect that it becomes harmonious, that you start having balance, and that you'll be able to rise upward. Right, Austin says Manas is the hardest one for me to understand. We're definitely going to clarify and get into that. Manas you can think of as the body, as the body's mind, right? That's one way to think of it. Stray Panther says, is that why Satan carries the pitchfork and the trident? Absolutely, because even though we've been taught to be afraid of Satan, even if you look at the tarot cards, the devil card, he rules the material plane, the physical plane. He's one of the entities that rules. What does it say? Satan is the god of this world in the Bible, right? all of it makes sense. All right, so let's keep going. Manas, Chitta, Buddhi, and Ahamkara behave differently under the sway of sattva as opposed to rajas and tamas, and thus manifest differently in the three states of awareness. Manas and Chitta, being a part of the conscious and subconscious awareness, dominate the actions and thoughts in the Jagriti and Swapna states. Jagriti is consciousness, Swapna is subconscious. So when we're looking at these levels of mind, Chitta and Manas, it's not as simple as conscious and subconscious, but the two of them together are what make up the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Okay? The two of them together are what makes up the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. It's not this is the conscious and this is the subconscious. It's not exactly like that. Manas does rule the body. It does rule a lot of the subconscious behavior of the body, like blinking, breathing, blood flow, and all that other stuff. But Chitta also has memory, right? And memory is very subconscious. It goes on below the level of the conscious mind. So between those two, they're what most people experience directly. Naturally Natured, peace and greetings. Good to see you. So Manas and Chitta, being part of the conscious and subconscious awareness, dominate the actions and thoughts in the Jagriti or conscious and Swapna or subconscious states. Buddhi and Ahamkara are present in varying degrees of refinement in the Jagriti, Swapna, and Sushupti states. And remember, the Sushupti is the unconscious. Jagriti is conscious, Swapna is subconscious, and Sushupti is unconscious. And what she's saying here is that Buddhi and Ahamkara does make itself aware in the conscious mind and the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind. So when you go through hypnosis or when you go through things that are Buddhi and Ahamkara have a much deeper influence on you than chitta and manas, right? These chitta and manas, conscious and subconscious, that does dominate your experience, but ego and Buddhi have a much deeper rooted influence, right? It's extremely difficult to release ego. This is the pure reason why we continue to reincarnate right here. It's extremely difficult, but we can start the process. We can start the process today. All right, so however, as these faculties have evolved out of each other and from the same principle of Shakti, their interdependence and invasion on each other are inevitable. Their interdependence and invasion on each other are inevitable. They're intrinsically linked, okay? It is evident that in these three states of consciousness, Antakarana is under the sway of the three gunas. Three gunas, right? Don't forget it. We're going to keep mentioning that over and over and over again. So it is evident that in these three states of consciousness, which are conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, Antakarana is under the sway of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, modifying itself to the guna which is predominant at any particular time, right? But in the fourth stage, which is transcendental, turiya, or transcendental awareness, the gunas cease to exert any influence. So that's what she was saying about when you come to master this inner tool, you can transcend generator, operator, destroyer influence. You can transcend that and begin to master it. Right? In the fourth stage, turiya, or transcendental awareness, the gunas cease to exert any influence, and thus the awareness is transported beyond the fluctuations of antakarana that exist in the preceding three states. This is only achieved by developing the full capacity of the antakarana through sadhana, or your spiritual discipline, so your spiritual practice. Remember yesterday we learned about the definition of sadhana, how it wasn't exactly meditation, but it was restraint and discipline, right? Remember we learned that yesterday reading the Paths of Pravriti and Nivriti, the second chapter, right? If you were here and were paying attention, restraint along with discipline is a sadhana of life. Restraint, and it was mental restraint, speech restraint, sense restraint. Remember that? This is the whole process. So it's not just the meditation, it's not just the mantras, it's not just dharana or dhyana. It's the discipline and the restraint. And it's through that process that you're able to develop the full capacity of Antakarana, right? And what that talks about is you begin to transcend the influences of what creates the manifest dimension, which means you begin to transcend the manifest dimension, right? You begin to transcend the manifest dimension. This is why different what are they called? The powers. Why the word escapes me right now. Oh my gosh, what is that word? Siddhis. There we go, siddhis. That's why the different siddhis begin to develop, because you transcend the influence of the manifest dimension, right? You become now a co-creator of reality. You begin to influence reality as opposed to reality just influencing you. Rai Dawson asks, does Tattvashuddhi only describe the jnana masculine non-attachment path, or does it utilize any strategies from the bhakti feminine devotion path? Absolutely. A huge part of this is from the bhakti devotion feminine path. At the end of the meditative process, you are encountering a vision of prana shakti, And at that point, it is purely bhakti, purely feminine. And that, to me, is the most intense part of the meditation. So yeah, it does include both aspects. Very good question. Sounds like you might know a thing or two. Sri Krishna Raj is the name of that one meditation you have to, if you didn't know yet, Trav. I'm not sure what that is. Wyatt Coverdale says, hard to swallow pill. The astral and physical are not separate or different from each other. The astral is the same illusion, only not needing to follow Newtonian or Euclidean physics. And so, thank you. The word I was looking for was siddhis. Siddhis, the spiritual abilities that form. Rai Dawson, I've loved Advaita Vedanta for a while now. Found it very helpful, but thanks. Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. All right, let's keep going. So, important thing here, in the fourth stage, transcendental awareness, the gunas cease to exert any influence. And that's what we're trying to get with our spiritual practice. We're trying to get to the point that the gunas cease to exert any influence. And again, that's what we read in the Passive Pravriti and Nivriti last night, that you want to reduce the influences of these vrittis. We want to reduce the influence that the vrittis have over your behavior, right? Because the deeper the level of influence, the less control you're having over your experience. Right? This is why people get triggered. Yeah, and this is the exact line actually on page 16 of the Passive Pravriti and Nivriti. And it says here on the bottom of page 16, it says, you have to know the reason why vrittis are created within you and how they connect you with the world of senses and sense objects. And you have to remain free from their influence, which dilutes the clarity, strength, and positive qualities of the mind. The influence of these vrittis, the influence of the gunas, it dilutes the clarity, strength, and positive qualities of mind. Right? So as long as you're under the influence of these things, you are, diluted. You're diluted and influenced. So let's keep going. Marco Power asks, Travis, would you describe the Qliphoth as feminine? Absolutely. All of the manifest dimension is feminine. All of the manifest dimension is feminine. So, yeah. And also there's a whole host of feminine entities associated with the description of the Qliphoth. So, you already know. In the practice of Tattva Shuddhi, the role of ANTAHKARANA is rendered clear. The aspirant is able to perceive the functionings of this powerful tool and the method of directing its full force towards spiritual attainment. Okay, so in the process of Tattva Shuddhi, you're able to perceive the functioning of the ANTAHKARANA, right? You're also able to perceive the method of directing its full force towards spiritual attainment. That's what most people are missing. Now let's get into each aspect of this inner tool. Let's get into each aspect of ANTAHKARANA. Buddhi, Ahamkara, Chitta, Manas. Now we're going to break down what each of these parts mean. Okay? I love this stuff. Rai Dawson says, so to reduce vrittis is the best method simply ignoring them, not giving them attention, or do you need to deal with them in some other way? So no, it's not just ignoring them. It is lessening your reactions to them, right? You don't ignore them, but you also don't allow them to influence you deeply. All right, so it's not about stopping them, it's about managing them. It's about having conscious control over how you respond to them. Right? Most people don't have conscious control over how they respond to these vrittis. They're automatically triggered, automatically engaged, and that's the problem. That's the issue that we have. You see what I'm saying? All right, so let's keep going. Buddhi. Let's start with Buddhi. Buddhi, which is also known as Mahat, or the Great Principle, is said to be the faculty closest to pure consciousness. Okay? Closest to pure consciousness. When Buddhi is turned towards the enjoyment of sensorial pleasures, it causes bondage of the soul. When Buddhi is turned towards the enjoyment of sensory pleasure, it causes bondage of the soul. But when it is endowed with dispassion, the soul turns toward liberation. In daily life, it is Buddhi that motivates you to act according to your dharma, or your vocation. Any act judged with precision and accuracy is on the account of the power and influence of Buddhi, or the higher intellect. At a higher level, Buddhi reflects itself through prajna, or intuition, and vairagya, or dispassion. Although these sublime qualities are inherent in Buddhi, under the influence of Maya, and due to its association with ego, senses, and the three gunas, these qualities are often altered. Okay, so when we talk about intuition, right, and we talk about non-attachment, which is vairagya, or dispassion, intuition and non-attachment, these are qualities that you'll see. I mean, just look at how the media depicts like a higher being, right? Buddha, or Jesus, or like somebody who's like transcended the matrix, right? They've just got this knowing, this intuition, and they've also got this dispassion, this vairagya. They're not wrapped up in the drama, right? They're not worried, they're not sweating, they're not freaking out. They're extremely calm. And the other characters are usually wrapped up in the drama, but these higher beings, they're usually not even concerned with none of the nonsense, right? That is what it looks like when Buddhi is in control, right? But check this out, that those qualities are natural and inherent to Buddhi. But because this higher self, because that's what this is, your higher self, because your higher self is under the influence of Maya, right, the illusion. And remember, we talked before about how Maya, it puts clouds and layers over the highest self, so you feel as if you're limited. So because the influence of that limitation, and because Buddhi associates with ego, which is attachment to this physical plane, so because of the limitations and the attachments and the senses and the three gunas, right, all that stuff is weighed upon and blocking your access to your higher self. Because of that, the qualities of intuition and non-attachment are often altered. So it's there, you have it, it's within you, but it is clouded and difficult to see through the fog, right? That's why meditation is so important. That's why Tattva Shuddhi is an important meditation, right? Sankofa Sound says, that shit's so right is wrong. Buddhi do all that. Yeah, it does. The etymology of these words, man, it's funny. Rai Dawson asks, is there a relation to the koshas? Kind of sounds like intellectual body. Well, as a matter of fact, at the beginning of this video, I was reading the Wikipedia article, and it does say that Buddhi is associated with the mental body, Vijnana Maya Kosha. So you're exactly right. Exactly. So the characteristics of the Sattvic Buddhi, right? Because we're looking at the Sattvic, that's what we're trying to get to, the Sattvic path. And in case you've forgotten, since the last 42 times I've shown it, Sattva is represented by goodness or balance, right? Peaceful, universal, harmonious, equilibrium, wise, refined, good, truthful, organization, the maintainer, right? The generator, operator, destroyer, the creator, the maintainer, the destroyer. Sattva is the maintainer aspect. Notice the arrows are going sideways instead of up and down. That's where we want to operate all of our levels of mind. We want it to operate under this guna. right? So in the sattvic state, Buddhi is without oscillation. It's not going up and down. It's not going crazy, and assumes the role of Sakshi, the witnesser. So it becomes the witnesser. Due to the influence of Rajas, and remember, Rajas is passion, right? Rajas represents agitation. It's selfish, passionate, active, restless, forceful, lustful, controlling, so active, right? That's Rajas. Remember, these are the three ingredients that create manifest reality. When Buddhi is up under Rajas like that, due to the influence of Rajas, defects arise. As a result, Buddhi is unable to discriminate, and the decisions are often contaminated by false knowledge and avidya, or ignorance. So think about all the times that you're not able to think straight because you're pissed off, you're upset, you're depressed, you're horny. Wow, deja vu. When you're feeling all these passionate emotions, it's very difficult to be able to discriminate. So your buddhi becomes contaminated, right? It becomes influenced by these gunas, which is again why you want to have it in a sattvic state. Now let's also look at the tamasic state, tamasic buddhi. Now here we go, generator, operator, destroyer. Tamas is the destroyer, and tamas is tormented. It's foolish, it's angry, it's stupid, it's lazy, it's deluded, it's harmful, it's distorted, it's lying, right? Check that out. So tamasic buddhi comes under the sway of ego. The higher self. Imagine your higher self being manipulated by ego. That's a sorry sight. When your higher self is under the influence of your ego, man, that's a sorry sight. But let me stop there before I start getting a little too specific. And is clouded by false information and false judgment. Have you seen anyone who has spiritual power, but it's under the influence of their ego? Where you can tell they got power, but it's under the influence of their ego. Now they're giving out false information, false judgment. That's a sorry sight, man. It's a sorry sight. So let's continue. In the practice of Tattva Shuddhi, we meditate on the sattvic nature of buddhi, so that the tamasic and rajasic tendencies, which are not its true nature and which prevent sattvic buddhi from operating, are removed. Thus, the experience of being the silent witnesser or sakshi is accentuated. Right? Let me know in the chat if this is clear so far. Let me know if you guys are catching this. Let me know if you're understanding this. Let me know if you're starting to distinguish the difference between like the three gunas, rajas, sattva, tamas. You're starting to see what buddhi is, ahamkara, chitta, manas, learning about the subconscious mind, conscious mind, transcendental mind, unconscious mind. Just let me know in the chat if any of this stuff is making sense to you. Good stuff, good stuff. So now let's get to Ahamkara. This is one that we're all super familiar with. Aham is I, and Ahamkara is ego, or that which experiences I-ness. Unified existence and unity at all levels is torn asunder at the birth of ego, and one perceives its separation from the rest of creation. Within ego is contained the germ of individuality, and thus a process of identification and attachment to objects and persons ensues. So Ahamkara is the I, right? It's the part of us that wants to be individual, right? It's the part of us that wants to be recognized and distinguished as separate and different from the rest of the universe. We want to stand out and be something special, right? It's a natural, inherent thing, natural, inherent quality of this part of the mind. But when ego is born, unified existence and unity at all levels is torn asunder. You cannot have unity with ego in control, right? They're at two polar opposite ends. Unified existence and unity at all levels is torn asunder at the birth of ego. And one perceives its separation from the rest of creation. You perceive your separation. And that's what happened with the fall of man. That's what happened. That's what the Bible is trying to describe when Adam and Eve were kicked out of heaven. In Genesis, it's trying to describe the manifestation and creation of ego, separation, right? Virez Beats. Peace, peace. Okay, so also within ego is contained the germ of individuality, and thus a process of identification and attachment to objects or persons ensues, right? So the germ of individuality exists within ego, and that starts a process of identification and attachment to objects and persons. So all of these people so wrapped up in name brands, so wrapped up in achievements, so wrapped up in all these different external identificators. Is that a word? Identificators? Identifiers? You get me. Ahamkara pervades each and every pore of your being. Its manifestation is extremely subtle, and the web it spins is so ensnaring that one remains bound in its clutches life after life. So this thing is so deep, it's not just something that you experience today. This is something that we're dealing with the whole time that we're here in this manifest dimension. Right, Alson says animals chill because they don't have a separate self sense. Exactly. That's why they're so in tune with nature, because they don't believe that they're any different from it like we do. So we remain bound in the clutches of ego life after life. Ahamkara, or ego, forms the nucleus of existence within an individual. It is only on account of the ego that you relate to things around you. It is only on account of the ego that you relate to the things around you. If there was no ego, you would be just like a plant or vegetable having no knowledge of your existence, right? So here we go again. A lot of people are so quick to jump to, oh, is it good? Oh, is it bad? It's not about good and bad. Good and bad is not how we think over here. It's about understanding what these things are and behaving accordingly. So ego isn't a bad thing, right? But it serves you well to understand, right? If there was no ego, you would be just like a plant or vegetable having no knowledge of your existence. And just like the vrittis, it's not that we want to delete your vrittis. You want to get to the point that you're able to manage them, right? Where does it say? You want to be able to manage these ripples, right? So it says right here, therefore, it is not stopping the vrittis that yoga aspires for, but managing the vrittis, right? This is the paradox of creation, that on the one hand, ego binds you to the plane of objective experience, and on the other hand, it exists as the nucleus which has to be exploded to awaken unified existence. In the conscious state, or Jagriti, ego operates through the gross body. Now remember, Jagriti is the consciousness, conscious versus subconscious. In the conscious state, or Jagriti, ego operates through the gross body, physical body, or the senses and the thinking mind. In the subconscious state, or Swapna, the ego operates through the astral body and dream. When you're in deep sleep, sushupti, the ego retires into seed state in the causal body. But in meditation, it is in the form of inner awareness. So this is the beneficial use of ego. When you're in meditation, you're able to utilize ego in such a way that it becomes something helpful and beneficial to you, right? So look at it when you're not in meditation. These are the forms that it's in. In your day-to-day conscious state, ego operates through your senses and your thinking mind, through your body, through your five senses. That's where ego operates through. In your subconscious mind, ego operates through your astral body and your dream, right? That's the connection between the subconscious mind and the astral body, because that's how ego is operating through the subconscious mind. Check. And when you're in deep sleep, this is when the ego retires into seed state. This is where it finally can get to the point where it is dormant, right? But in meditation, you're able to use it as inner awareness. Ahamkara is so deeply embedded that it even remains through the stages of savikalpa samadhi. That just shows how powerful this thing is. Even at the highest levels of enlightenment, Ahamkara is still there, right? So this is not something you're going to get rid of. It just has to be managed properly. Let me read that line again, because for those of you who know what this means, that just goes to show how deep this thing goes. Ahamkara is so deeply embedded that it even remains through the stages of savikalpa samadhi. Damn, son, where'd you find this? Damn, son, where'd you find this? The functions of Ahamkara are affected by the three qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas. The functions of Ahamkara are affected by the three qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattvic Ahamkara is responsible for the notion that I am and acts as a catalyst in the process of self-realization. Ahamkara stirs up samskaras, or latent impressions, from the subconscious mind, but under the influence of sattva, or balance, it temporarily withdraws this function. Rajasic Ahamkara is a dynamic force which kindles I-ness in the individual, causing intense activity and restlessness. Ultimately, it leads to dissipation of thought and action. So those of you who are under the influence of being scattered or having a cloudy mind, not being able to focus, what's going on here? Your Ahamkara is under the Rajasic influence. Ultimately, it leads to dissipation of thought and action. Tamasic Ahamkara intensifies the painful and negative samskaras, thus causing doubt, apprehension, fear, and procrastination. So check that out. Somebody who, you go to do something, you go to act, you go to behave, and what is drudged up are painful memories, painful thoughts, negative memories, right? Then you start having doubt in yourself. You start becoming apprehensive and having anxiety and not really moving forward. You're getting overwhelmed. You're having fear, procrastination. And I can go back to that chart in power versus force. And those lower levels are absolutely tamasic ahamkara, right? Because everything that you try to do, you have to work through doubt, apprehension, overwhelm, fear, procrastination. All of that is a quality of a tamasic ahamkara, right? So on one hand, dealing with tamasic ahamkara, you're experiencing a lot of negativity and self-doubt, and it's very unpleasant. Under rajasic ahamkara, you're so scattered that you barely get anything done, right? You can't even concentrate or focus, let alone finish what you start, right? So you don't want your ego up here in rajas, and you damn sure don't want it in tamas. What we want is the sattvic ahamkara, right? And that as this book says, is the catalyst for the process of self-realization. Evil Empire. Nice. I don't know you guys got that all the way over there in the UK. Ganon steps back. Ahamkara can be considered the source of both limitation and liberation. So check that out. Somebody in the group chat years ago was talking about how it can either be, well, he's talking about the Bible, but he said that it can either be your stepping stone, your footstool, or your ceiling, right? The same thing can be what limits you, or it can be the thing that allows you to rise higher, right? So she says Ahamkara can be considered the source of both limitation and liberation of the jiva, or individual soul. Although it stays with one a long time on one's life journey, through sadhana, one is gradually able to refine its negative forces. By the practice of Tattva-Shuddhi, we become more aware of the subtlety of ego, thus making it easier to disidentify with its lower functions. All right? So that's very important to understand. It's not about getting rid of your ego or trying to get away from it or any of that stuff. It's about managing it. It's about managing the subtle behavior, just like what Swami Niranjan Ananda Saraswati said in chapter 2 of the passive pravritti and nivritti. It's about managing the subtle behaviors. That's on the very last page of the whole chapter, right? The very last page of the chapter, he says, therefore, what is called discipline in English is called anusana in Sanskrit. Its literal meaning is acquiring the ability to control the subtle behaviors of one's nature. Know thyself. Trapaholics. Real trap shit. That's funny. Manas and chitta. All right. So here's your favorite part, Riley Dawson. Riley Dawson asks, what's the difference between jiva and atman? The difference between jiva and atman is like the difference between the sun and the sun's reflection in a mirror, right? You're looking at the same thing, but one is the thing and one is a reflection of the thing. That's also something that I read just the other night. Basically, what it says here is, as we've observed in the preceding chapters, the macrocosmic essence of Brahman and the microcosmic essence of Atman are pure undifferentiated spirit. Brahman is the source of the Atman, a free soul, which is known as the Jivatma when it is embodied within the microcosm. The embodied soul can, at best, only partially represent the original reality because it is essentially only the reflection of the Atman. A reflection of the sun can never equal in power and brilliance the sun itself. Likewise, the power and brilliance of a conditioned soul can never equal that of Brahman. That's the difference between Jiva and Atman. Okay, so Manas and Chitta. Manas and Chitta represent the external mind and mind stuff. Okay, Manas is the external mind. Chitta would be the mind stuff, and that's kind of where we're at right now in January's study of the passive pravritti and nivritti. Right, this is all going in order. Trust me. So, Manas and Chitta represent the external mind and mind stuff, i.e., the stuff which is apparent in waking and dream states. Chitta is the seat of all experiences in the form of samskaras, archetypes, and memory. Manas, or thought counterthought, is its vehicle or means of expression. So again, chitta is the seat of all experiences in the form of samskaras, archetypes, and memory. Manas, or thought counterthought, is its vehicle or means of expression. Manas is the vehicle of chitta. Manas and chitta do not simply function by themselves. They are guided by the logical reasoning of Buddhi and the assertive tendencies of Ahamkara. Right? They don't simply function by themselves. They are guided by the logical reasoning of Buddhi and the assertive tendencies of Ahamkara. Ahamkara grabs. The inherent quality of manas is to be dominated by Rajo Guna. The inherent quality of manas, or thought and counterthought, or the expression of chitta, the inherent quality of manas is to be dominated by Rajo Guna. And what does Rajas represent? Rajas represents agitation, selfishness, passionate, active, restless, forceful, lustful, controlling, right? The generator aspect of generator, operator, destroyer, the creator, Rajas, fiery nature, active nature. The inherent quality of manas, is to be dominated by the Rajoguna. It is forever distracted and diversified, right? Monkey mind. It is forever distracted and diversified. Just as a little child picks up a toy, but soon leaves it for another. Similarly, it is the tendency of manas to continuously jump from one thought to another. Monkey mind. So, Rai Dawson, you said you had wanted more clarification, had trouble understanding about manas. Another word for manas is monkey mind. Right? Another term is monkey mind, continuously jumping from one thought to another. Ooh, 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 ah, ah, ah. Right, Austin says, is that like chitta holds all the memories, but then manas goes like, hey, don't order that. You hated that last time. That's a good example. But I would even go to say, manas doesn't even decide whether or not you order it. Manas is just like, hey, we ordered that last time and we didn't like it. Should we get it again or should we not? I don't know. Manas doesn't really make decisions, but it does present the options. See up here where it says thought, counter thought? So manas is going to say, hey, you hated it last time. Should we get it again? It isn't necessarily intelligent like that. It's more of that, we call people NPCs, non-player characters, autopilot, that kind of thing. That is, that's what manas is, that autopilot humanity, right? Good stuff, good stuff. This Rajasic tendency is altered when manas comes under the sway of Ahamkara to a state of tamas. And again, remember what tamas is. Tarzan and cheetah, nice. Yeah, and that happens to me all the time. Like I always give that example. Like I will literally go into the kitchen and open the fridge and I will see these two options that are both so good. You know what I'm saying? Like I can make this vegan sausage spaghetti, or I can make, this cauliflower buffalo chicken stuff that would taste awesome. And I'll sit there and think about how awesome they'll both taste and be unable to come up with a decision, so I'll just have to leave. Nothing will get cooked. That's an example of that thought counter thought. But let's keep going here. So the Rajasic tendency is altered when manas comes under the sway of Ahamkara to a state of tamas, and transformed when it comes under the sway of Buddhi to a state of equilibrium or sattva. So it is naturally Rajasic, but that is altered when Ahamkara is under a state of tamas, right? And we just talked about previously, Ahamkara being under a state of tamas is, Tamasic Ahamkara intensifies the painful negative samskaras, causing doubt, apprehension, fear, and procrastination. So that tamasic flavored Ahamkara, that tamasic Ahamkara, tamasic ego, that's what's beating you up. That's the negative self-talk, right? That's the doubt. That's the, oh, well, they'll make fun of me, they won't like it, or no one will understand, or you can't do it, you suck. That's tamasic Ahamkara, tamasic ego. And when manas comes under the influence of that tamasic Ahamkara, when manas comes under the influence of that self-doubt, negative self-talk, it becomes transformed. It becomes altered. So this rajasic, it's naturally rajasic and active, but it becomes transformed if Ahamkara is negative. So again, this rajasic tendency is altered when manas comes under the sway of Ahamkara to a state of tamas, and transformed when it comes under the sway of Buddhi to a state of equilibrium or sattva. And that's what we actually want. Thus, Ahamkara and Buddhi operate through manas, right? Ego and higher self operate through manas, external mind, drawing upon the contents of past impressions stored in the chitta to create an experience of happiness or unhappiness, pain or pleasure. Now we have this right here is an algorithm. If you're able to see the ones and zeros through your matrix eyes, this sentence that I highlighted is an algorithm, right? So you've got to know what these words mean to be able to see that algorithm. I can see that algorithm just like a math equation. Buddhi, Ahamkara, Chitta, Manas. Manas being the external mind, right? The senses, the body, thought and counter thought, right? Chitta being the conscious mind, being the mind stuff, being the memory, being archetypes, being impressions. Ego being the individuality and the tendency to attach, right? Buddhi being the highest intellect, the higher self, the decision maker, the intuition, right? These are the four ingredients of mind, Antakarana. These are the four aspects of the Antakarana, right? Now check out this algorithm right here. Check out this algorithm. It says thus, Ahamkara and Buddhi, ego and higher self, operate through manas, right? Operate through manas, which is external mind. And it so higher self and ego operates through the external mind, drawing upon the contents of the past impressions stored in the chitta. And that process creates an experience of happiness or unhappiness, pain or pleasure. That is why people run towards pleasure and run away from pain, because their higher self and their ego is operating through their physical body, and everything that you do, whenever something happens, or whenever a thought happens, or an action happens, or when any of your five senses are triggered in your experience, your higher self and your ego instantly go into your memory and your archetypes, and it begins to draw out, hey, is this good? Is this bad? Does this feel good, or does this hurt? And it uses that right there. This is someone who isn't working on themselves. This is all just automatic process. So when that happens, if it feels good, they're going to keep doing it. If it feels bad, they're going to run from it. Right? You have to literally go within, sit at the cockpit, the commander's chair, and you have to literally start to reprogram it to operate in the way that you want it to operate. Otherwise, this is the natural algorithm that happens. Ahamkara and Buddhi operate through manas, drawing upon the contents of past impressions stored in the chitta to create an experience of happiness or unhappiness. The activity of manas changes constantly under the influence of the three gunas. The activity of manas changes constantly under the influence of the three gunas. In the state of sattva, manas becomes steady, one-pointed, and concentrated. Manas influenced by rajas activates the senses and unbalances the intellect, right? You become so active that you can't even think straight. Tamasic manas makes the intellect and senses lazy and inactive. This is why it happens, because it's under the influence. Very good stuff. Very good stuff. So that right there, Tamasic manas makes the intellect senses lazy and inactive. It's not that you're lazy, but your Ahamkara might be under the influence of tamas, thereby causing your actions and thoughts to be lazy. You're not a lazy person, but your machinery, your mechanics, your algorithms are behaving in a lazy manner. Now, it's important to distinguish between that, because if you are lazy, you can't really fix that. But if you're operating under a lazy algorithm, you can change the algorithm, right? So it's very important to understand. It's very important to understand. If you attribute the different qualities to where they're supposed to go, they become easily manageable. Welcome to anybody who's just joining or joined during the middle. Please like this video, because it lets YouTube know that this information is worth watching and promoting, etc., etc. Peter H., we are studying Tattva Shuddhi. Tattva Shuddhi. Okay, so that was manas. That was the external mind. That was thought, counter thought. That was the means of expression of chitta. Speaking of chitta, let's talk about chitta. Chitta is sometimes referred to as the higher mind or intellect, but here we are only concerned with its function as memory. Under the influence of sattva, the sense impressions contained within chitta recede. Under the influence of sattva, here's sattva, right? This is egg-shaped on purpose. Prakriti is often thought of as egg-shaped. But here, under the influence of sattva, the sense impressions contained within chitta recede, so that the consciousness remains undisturbed. This is one of the points of meditation, so that these sensory impressions, these memories, these archetypes, they don't disturb you. But under the influence of sattva, the sense impressions contained within chitta recede, so that the consciousness remains undisturbed. Through the influence of rajoguna, the rajasic samskaras are awakened in chitta in the form of vikalpa, or imagination, and vaparyaya, or false knowledge. Okay? Imagination and false knowledge. We get lots of that also in this spiritual community. People who don't do any study and don't have any experience, they get a little good feeling type of meditation and they go off making stuff up. This is the result of a rajasic chitta, and their imagination runs wild and they're filled with false knowledge. You'll find a lot of that. That's why I like to verify where I get my information from and back up my experience with that, as humanity has done throughout the years, because that is what education is. That is what scholarship is. In this state, chitta contains both types of samskaras of knowledge and ignorance, passion and dispassion. So a rajasic chitta, it means well, but it is so filled with both ignorance and knowledge, passion and dispassion. So let's talk about tamasic chitta. When tamas influences chitta, undesirable samskaras well up. Thus, the individual is clouded by vasanas, or deep-rooted desires, pushing all the good samskaras into obscurity. When you're in that state, and you are obsessed, when you are just taken over with these deep-rooted desires, it's very difficult to think straight, right? It's very difficult to do good. It pushes all the good samskaras into obscurity. It is only possible to eliminate irrelevant samskaras through the process of reflection, dharana, and dhyana, right? It is only possible to eliminate irrelevant samskaras through the process of reflection, dharana, and dhyana. Perfection in the practice of tattva shuddhi leads the aspirant to one-pointed concentration and meditation. So awareness becomes free to reflect on the nature of the tattvas. We have to realize that the main pathway to attainment of self-realization lies through the Antahkarana. In order to gain full control over the direction of its development, we will have to turn to tantric and yogic sadhana. In the practice of tattva shuddhi, we use the latent forces of Antahkarana to direct the awareness away from gross experience towards higher experience. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. To me, at least. I don't know if it makes sense to you. I hope it does. But, it looks very, very clear to me. Very clear. So, again, this was Antahkarana, and it's very important to understand Antahkarana. You got these four aspects of self. You got these four aspects of self. And it's important to know that those four aspects, just like everything else within the manifest dimension, can be under the influence of rajas, sattvas, or tamas. Now they also operate within the four states, which is the conscious state, the subconscious, and the unconscious state. But guess what? When you start doing the work, when you start doing tattva shuddhi, when you start managing the Antahkarana, you can now start to operate the inner tool in the transcendental state, which is, when it says transcendental, it means it transcends the gunas. There is a state beyond the manifest dimension, and that's where we're trying to take our inner tool, to a state that is beyond the influence of both rajas and tamas, but also beyond sattva. It's only through sattva that we can get there. Just like I am the path, I am the way, the truth, and the light, and the only way to get to the Father is through me. Just like the only way to really get up to Kether is through this middle path, the only way to transcend the influence of the material plane through the manifest dimension, the only way to transcend the influence of the manifest dimension is when you're able to manage this inner tool and take it through the sattvic path. Then you can experience the transcendental nature, which is the inner tool not being under the influence of the gunas. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's what we're looking towards, right? So this should all start to make sense. This should all start to make, it's not about worshiping a being, an entity, a person. It's not about none of that stuff. This is about managing the self, managing the self, managing the self, the subtle aspects of the self. Andre Richter says, what about Da'at? Yeah, Da'at is definitely another point that has to be faced. Da'at represents knowledge, right? Now, that's the point where you prove whether or not you're quote unquote an armchair occultist or you're the real deal, because anybody can learn knowledge. But like I said, what we're dealing with has to be transcendental. You've got to be able to transcend the knowledge that you've accumulated. You've got to be able to build up book after book of knowledge to reach this point. Then you've got to leave it all behind, because through all that study, you should have also been doing practice, right? And through all that study, the practice will show you what's between the words. What you should reach a level of wisdom and understanding, right? Through the knowledge that you accumulated. The knowledge isn't going to get you up there. It's the wisdom through the knowledge. It's the understanding through the knowledge that's going to get you up there. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in an abyss of words and pages and books piled up everywhere that you don't really understand and you didn't get any wisdom from because you didn't balance study and practice. You didn't balance study and practice, so you get lost in the abyss. So that's what about doth. So check it out. Check it out. There's another part that I want to read that is from a book that's out of print. You might be able to find it. I think last I saw it on Amazon and eBay, it was like $40 or something like that. But it also has a chapter on the ANTAHKARANA. I looked through all my books and I didn't really see any other chapters specifically on ANTAHKARANA. But I did see it in this book, and I'm gonna read it. But I need you guys to give me just a second. Just a second. Let me see something here. 3 states of intellect, non-duality, page 29. Yeah, if you guys can hang on for just a second, I will be right back. Don't touch that dial. It won't be gone for more than like 2 minutes. Hold on. Just trillion times. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I am for real. Hecate Goddess says, okay, transmit the knowledge and wisdom through that. Knowledge is what makes a good magician, Travis. Absolutely. That is what makes a good magician, to be able to take this knowledge and transmute it into wisdom and understanding. That's the point. That's the point. It's not about just having a bunch of books. You know what I'm saying? It's also not about just trying to wing it and just, oh, I'm natural and I live the magic. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's got to be a balance between study and practice. There's got to. Because that is how wisdom and understanding is created. Practice is fundamental. Absolutely, Hecate. Practice is fundamental. Marco Power says, question, Travis. Was listening to a dude and he said, eventually you want to dissolve the chakras. Why would he say that? I know it's hard to speak for others, but I'm confused by that statement. Yeah, you know, and you will get people every now and then saying stuff like that. I don't know that guy, or I don't know who you're talking about. So, you know, I don't know what video it is, or I guess I'd have to hear the rest of it to really make a judgment on that. But that's not really nothing that I've seen, right? And I study the Vedic and the Sanskrit and all this stuff. I haven't seen anything that talks about dissolving your chakras. So, like Bobby Hemmett said, if I don't see it in the ancient texts that don't exist, I can't speak on that. That's not something that maybe he knows something I don't know. Maybe he's saying something that I overlooked. I don't know. Can't speak for the fellow. I'm sure he means well, but I don't know anything about that. Now, I have seen people talk about that, and just listening to them, I can see they don't know what they're talking about. But like I said, I haven't seen that dude, so I don't know. But the few people I have seen who mentioned that, they heard someone else say it, and then they're just repeating it and regurgitating it. That's what I have seen. I've seen people just regurgitating nonsense because they heard somebody else say it. But yeah, the one thing that I have heard in that realm that makes sense is it comes to a realization that the seven chakras are meant to be seen as a whole. And when a person talked about melting them or whatever, it was just figurative, because you're not gonna melt your chakras. Like you know what I'm saying? It's not something to melt. But maybe you know something I don't know. That's always a possibility. Doubt it, but it's a possibility. Right, Dawson said, maybe like once you clear all the way to the top, like absorb back into the source, maybe you don't need chakras there. But that sounds pretty out there to me. I need my chakras. And yeah, see, that makes more sense. Even in the meditation of Tat with Shuddhi, you begin to quote unquote dissolve the tattvas as you ascend to a finer and more subtle vibration, right? That's what you begin to do. They're still there. It's just that your awareness of them dissolves, and you begin to become aware of a more subtle state of existence. Now you have to rebuild them and come back to them, because they're part of the physical existence, just like your chakras are a part of your physical existence. They're not physical, but they're part of your physical existence. But you can transcend your awareness of them and undergo a meditative process where your awareness of them dissolves, yes. And once you transcend manifest reality, then you're at a point where your chakras don't really have any, effect or anything like that. They're not important. But that's a state of being, not so much them being dissolved. So maybe we're just talking about language here. Maybe we're just talking a difference of language, right? Who knows? Mario79 says, some black magicians know that chakras are energy points, so resolving them makes them untouchable. Just an illusionist guess. And I like what you said there, Andre Richter. He says it could be because the chakras are a division of forces from the one consciousness. Dissolving them would mean reunite in this context. Yeah, absolutely, and that makes total sense. It could just be semantics, I am for real. Never meant to make your daughter cry. Apologize a trillion times. Sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I am for real. Mentos brother, Mentos brother. Mentos, the fresh maker. Okay, so I'm gonna read this part as well about the internal instrument. And this comes from a book by the name of, what's it called? I forgot what it's called. Awakening the Life Force, that's it. All right, so let's get to what this author says about the ANTAHKARANA, the internal instrument. So check this out. Go. All right, so check this out. The first result of creation is the emergence of the four aspects of the internal instrument of cognition, ANTAHKARANA, which consists of chitta, individual consciousness, the Buddhi, intellect, known as Mahat, the Ahamkara, ego, and the logical thinking, manas, mind. And just to show a diagram, because some of us really enjoy visuals, page 45, top of Shuddhi, Prakriti, the egg, right? The egg of manifest creation. She's called the creatrix. Out of her evolves Buddhi. Out of Buddhi evolves Ahamkara, then Chitta, then Manas. So that all is an evolute of Prakriti. They're called evolutes of Prakriti because they come up out of her. 1025 tattvas, right? 25 tattvas. There's that egg shape because she's an egg. Let's continue. So, the first result of creation is the emergence of the four aspects, right? The first result of creation. Because of creation, these aspects emerge. They emerge. The first result of creation is the emergence of the four aspects of the internal instrument of cognition, ANTAHKARANA, which consists of chitta, individual consciousness, buddhi, intellect, also known as mahat, the ahamkara, ego, and the logical thinking, manas, mind. Chitta, the individual consciousness, as discussed earlier, is the limited reflection of the pure consciousness of Brahman, and is, as such, is potentially transcendent and immaterial. It's potentially transcendent and immaterial. Can you guys see the words, or is it blurry? It looks blurry on my phone. There we go. There we go. Okay, so it is potentially transcendent and material. It's talking about chitta. The remaining three aspects of the internal instrument of cognition are only subtle forms of matter. See the color plate. I guess we'll see the color plate since it says see the color plate. Let's see the color plate then. What it is, or what's up. I think this is it, maybe. Prakriti. Yeah, that might be it. Okay, so we got Prakriti, and notice we got Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and look at how they're balanced. Look at how they're in unity. And the unmanifest, right? Now we get to manifest creation, and the first thing is Buddhi, or intellect. And orange or the yellow represents Sattva, the red represents Rajas, the blue represents Tamas. Now they're all kind of wavy, kind of disturbed, because consciousness is interacting with it now. Because consciousness is interacting with it now. Now it begins to vibrate a little bit, just like the grain of sand inside of the oyster's mouth, and it's starting to make layers and layers. Now, as it begins to crystallize, condense, and calcify just a bit more, it becomes Ahamkara, which is ego. And at this point in Ahamkara of ego, notice how the gunas have begun to really crystallize to the point that they're becoming individualized. And this is happening in the ego form. And for those of you who meditate, you know about the state of Om. That's happening here at the Ahamkara stage. So Mahat and Buddhi is transcendent of the Om stage. But here we are at this Om stage where we've got Ahamkara, ego, attachment. And it is the prana, the vital force of prana, that is vitalizing the activity and causing this to happen. Out of manas, out of this comes chitta. But let's go back to what we were reading. All right, so Dawson says, so amazing how divine feminine simultaneously can cover and keep us from source, pure consciousness, but also works as the ladder and language by which we climb our way back. Perfect system. Absolutely. And that's, again, why I use the example of the grain of sand within the oyster. So this whole experience, this whole situation is almost like birth, just like how the seed makes its way into the womb. It is covered and developed by the feminine energy, feminine essence, and then it's pushed out. The same thing is happening on the macrocosm, right? Consciousness somehow finds its way into matter, and then matter does everything it can to get him the hell out. And then eventually she gives birth, reverse birth, and consciousness leaves matter again. Consciousness evolves. Now, we're going to go through that process in more detail in May, as far as the book study group is concerned. But, you don't have to wait that long if you don't want to. I would recommend getting this book called Samkhya Darshan. And this describes that reverse birth process in high detail, right? And when I say high detail, I mean, I love what it says here at the beginning. This ain't just little kid stuff. This is compiled from lectures given to postgraduate students in yoga philosophy at the Bihar Yoga Bharati. So this is like that advanced knowledge. But check it out. We know that these authors are so well learned in their craft that they're able to speak regular language to regular people. So it's not like hyper complex. He breaks it down in a language that makes sense. So get this book. We're going to be going over this in a book study group in, like I said, May. But if you want to go ahead and start reading it, this is an amazing book that goes into great detail on everything, especially that process of matter. Divine feminine is literally doing everything she can to get consciousness up out of her. The same way that a mother, might have her son staying at home and he's like, old enough to go out and do his own thing, and she's kind of tired of him and wants to kick him out the nest. That's kind of what's going on here. But it's not hostile. Not hostile. It's just the way it is. Just the way it is. Changing spiritually. Greetings. Okay, so let's continue. Real trap shit. Trapaholics. Mahat, synonymous with Buddhi, intellect, literally means great. Like Mahatma Gandhi, or I think there's that rice called Mahat. I mean, I have some, but I think it's anyways, it means great. It is the first and only direct devolute of Prakriti, like we saw on the chart, from which the remaining components of the microcosm devolve. It represents the power of translogical, intuitive comprehension that lies directly behind and works closely with our linear thinking manas mind. Manas mind, monkey mind, is responsible for thinking linear thinking, from point A to point B to point C to point D. It's not abstract. It's linear, right? So again, Mahat, the great. Buddhi, intellect, that means the great. It's the first direct devolution of Prakriti, or the material plane. Because remember, your experience, you are one and the same with the created manifest dimension. You and it are the same thing, right? And what we're trying to do is experience what we are outside of her, beyond her, transcendent of her. That's what we're trying to understand. What reality is beyond the manifest dimension. It's very difficult because all the data that we have and all of our sensory organs are tuned into the manifest dimension. So it's very difficult to perceive beyond the manifest dimension. That's what we ask, Lord, at the same time. Father God, let's continue. So yeah, Mahat, the great Buddhi, is the first devolute from Prakriti, and it represents the power of translogical. So trans means beyond. Buddhi represents the power of translogical, beyond logic, intuitive comprehension, knowing, right? A knowing comprehension, beyond logical knowing comprehension that lies directly behind and works closely with our linear thinking mind, which is manas. So Buddhi works with manas, but Buddhi works in a way that's abstract and beyond logic, right? That's the creative mind. The Buddhi intellect is also the storehouse of conscious memory, as well as of unconscious subliminal impressions known as samskaras. Because the Buddhi intellect is closely linked with our divine essence or chitta, individual consciousness, which both animates it and is the ultimate source from which it emerges, the Buddhi intellect is often referred to as being seated in the divine essence. Chitta indicates chitta is individual consciousness. Okay. The Ahamkara, ego, is the subsequent derivative of Buddhi intellect. So just like what I have here, Buddhi comes directly up out of Prakriti, which is the manifest dimension. Out of Buddhi comes Ahamkara, or ego, right? And that's where the gunas are starting to become calcified, starting to become very dense. Greetings, Mad Bear. Andre Richter says the choice of the cute unicorn pin has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. Matthew Watson, the book is called Awakening the Life Force. Awakening the Life Force. If you can find it, I'd get it, if you're going to read it. 222. Like the video if you like it. Let's get back to it here. So the Ahamkara, ego, is the subsequent derivative of Buddhi intellect, and Ahamkara is the so-called executive power of the mundane mind that seeks out experiences in the external world, prompted by ripening subconscious impulses, samskaras. So Ahamkara ego is the executive power, right? Executes. It's very active. What's the word that she used in Taught with Shidi? Not aggressive, but let's see. Assertive. Yeah, she called it assertive. She said that Ahamkara was assertive. They are guided, manas and chitta are guided by the logical reasoning of Buddhi and the assertive tendencies of Ahamkara. And what he says here is that the Ahamkara is the executive power of the mundane mind that seeks out experiences in the external world, right? The ego seeks out experiences in the external world, and its impulses that begin to ripen like fruits, and eventually they cause us to behave in certain ways. Let's keep going. The ego itself creates and reinforces these conditional likes and dislikes. The ego itself creates and reinforces these conditional likes and dislikes, which subsequently control it from the conscious and unconscious memory banks of the intellect. Rai Dawson says, isn't that different than what Taught with Shidi said? I thought memory was in chitta, not Buddhi. And I thought individual consciousness was like jiva or something. Absolutely. So there is a small discrepancy there. And that's why I said at the very beginning, these concepts are kind of abstract. So no one book is going to have like the ultimate definition. You're going to see slight differences across the board, because for one, these are being translated from another language and another culture. So the real definition of these words and terms and phrases are far wider reaching than just what one author says. That's why I'm reading the second book, just to kind of give them a wider perspective here. Take it as data and information, and then go in your inner laboratory and begin doing tests and experiments and seeing what you come up with. But these are good guiding directives to kind of have an idea of the 4 different aspects of what we call mind and self. You feel me? So different authors, coming from different schools of thought, different parts of the world, you might see slight differences, but that's okay. Don't get confused. Don't feel upset about it. Nothing like that. Just find the similarities between the two. That's what we want to do. Don't study the differences. Find the similarities. And when you start looking for the similarities between the two sources, the truth reveals itself. You feel me? Especially when you're talking about the more abstract parts of the mind, Buddhi and Ahamkara. You're going to start seeing different things, especially for those two, because they're the most subtle. But I think we can all agree on Manas and its monkey mind tendencies and not knowing what it wants to eat for dinner. So we end up eating nothing or something unhealthy. Let us continue. So, while the Ahamkara ego directs the other components of the internal instrument of cognition, Ahamkara, ANTAHKARANA, while the Ahamkara ego directs the other components of the internal instrument of cognition, ANTAHKARANA, due to its executive position, it alone experiences the pleasures and pains of the situations it creates for the microcosm. So check that out. The pleasure and the pain that we run away from and run towards, only the ego experiences that. Only the ego gets to enjoy the pleasure and the pain. Not the chitta, not the manas. Because remember, we talked about the manas. The manas can say, do I want the spaghetti or do I want the hamburger? It can't make the decision. It only has the data. And a lot of people are so afraid of artificial intelligence and computers coming to life. They're going to lack this quality. You can have all the data in the world, but it takes a more subtle aspect of consciousness to be able to enjoy the pleasure or to suffer from the pain. That's the job of the ego. It alone experiences the pleasures and the pains of the situation it creates for the microcosm. By its very nature, the ego mistakes itself for the pure consciousness of chitta, individual consciousness, which it dimly reflects. Ahamkara ego functions only on the lower plane of subject-object relationships, while pure consciousness transcends such distinctions. Chitta, individual consciousness, is unconditioned self-awareness, which exists beyond the realm of thought and concept. Ahamkara ego is a thought-bound entity, conditioned by the need to preserve its own artificial existence. So you want to talk about artificial intelligence? Well, that's what ego is. That's what Ahamkara is. So it's funny, we are artificial intelligence trying to create artificial intelligence, not realizing that it's already created. Very interesting. Very interesting. Again, Ahamkara ego is a thought-bound entity. Listen, ego, Ahamkara, only exists within the limits of thought, right? That alone should tell you that you are not your thoughts. You're not this thing that you think you are. I think, therefore I am. Ahamkara is a thought-bound entity. It cannot exist beyond thought. Now, there is an aspect of you that is beyond thought. Think about that for just a second. You're sitting here thinking thoughts and you're having ideas and questions in your head and you're trying to figure it all out. And all that is linear, right? It's time based. This thought process, it only exists in the present moment, past, present, future, right? It can't go beyond those boundaries. But there's a part of you, if you're still and quiet enough and you just observe, there's a part of you that can actually zoom out and look at this thought-bound entity. There's a part of you that can actually zoom out and look at this thought-bound entity. You can see it for what it is. Now, this part of you is beyond thought. You can sit here and observe your thoughts. I hope you catch what I'm saying here, right? I hope you can catch what I'm saying here. All right, so Ahamkara ego is a thought-bound entity conditioned by the need to preserve its own artificial existence. The self remains completely covered by Ahamkara ego and can be realized only when ego's artificial existence is totally dissolved. The self can only exist because it's covered by ego. It can only be realized when ego's artificial existence is totally dissolved. Now, with the dissolution of egoism, our subject-object distinctions, duality, also disappear and transcendental awareness dawns. That is the beginning of true self-awareness. While both Buddhi intellect and Ahamkara ego are involutional derivatives springing from the combination of all the three gunas, Buddhi intellect hierarchically precedes and is functionally superior to Ahamkara ego. Right? While both Buddhi intellect and Ahamkara ego are involutional derivatives springing from the combination of all three gunas, Buddhi intellect hierarchically precedes and is functionally superior than Ahamkara ego. In other words, that's a long ass sentence to say Buddhi is superior to ego. That is because the former is both translogical and characterized by a predominance of the illuminating sattva guna, while the latter is characterized by an alternately dominating mixture of all three gunas. So ego is dominated by it's alternately dominated by a mixture of the three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva. Ego is dominated by the three gunas, right? But Buddhi is translogical, meaning it's beyond logic. It's beyond logic. And it is illuminated by sattva. Note that the gunas do not manifest one by one or individually. All three are present in each derivative of Prakriti, but in varying proportions. So it's not that somebody's just Rajasic or just Tamasic or just Sattvic. You carry them in proportions. Remember, everything about this science, magic, spirituality, tree of life, the Vedic stuff, all this stuff, it's about the relationships in between the things, right? So what we're learning about this ANTAHKARANA, again, we're looking at the different relationships between these parts. We learn about each individual part, but we don't understand them until we're able to see the relationships that they have between each other. Very key. Very key. So note that the gunas do not manifest one by one or individually. All three are present in each derivative of Prakriti, but in varying proportions. Ahamkara ego has the potential of being colored by the predominant proportions of the three gunas. It can become distinctly sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Out of sattvic Ahamkara ego is derived our lower manas mind and our 5 cognitive senses, or jnanendriyas. Rajasic egoism develops into our 5 organs of action, karmendriyas, while Tamasic egoism produces the subtle primary elements, the tanmatras. Thus, from Ahamkara ego, the continuing process of manifestation splits off into three different directions, corresponding to each of the three gunas. So because Ahamkara, or ego, is dominated by the activity of the gunas, it actually splits off into three other parts, right? And those are the organs of action, the organs of knowledge, and the five elements. And we see that happening here. Out of Prakriti, the egg of creation, comes Buddhi, which is the trans-logical higher self. Out of that higher self comes Ahamkara, which is ego, right? And it keeps splitting and breaking down into a more dense aspect of reality. And from there, we get the five elements, you get your five senses, you get your five organs of action, and it keeps going. So it talks about the Jnanendriyas, the Karmendriyas, and the Tanmatras. What are those? Well, the Tanmatras are the subtle essences, right? Shabda, which is sound, and that comes from Akasha. Sparsha, which is touch, that comes from Vayu, or the air. Rupa comes from form, that comes from Agni, or fire. Rasa, or taste, comes from Apas, or water. Gandha, smell, comes from Prithvi, or earth. The Jnanendriyas, or the organs of knowledge, are the ears, or the perception of sound, the skin, or the tactile sense, the eyes, or the seeing, the tongue, or the tasting, and the nose, or the smelling. Then, of course, the Karmendriyas are speech, your hand for grasping, the foot for moving, the reproductive organs, and the anal region, or the organ of evacuation. All of these things come out of ego, and ego uses those tools to pretty much move around in the earth, the same way that we use a remote control to play Fortnite and other Xbox and PlayStation video games, or Wii or Switch, if you're one of those kind of people. Let's see. Manas mind is the thinking mind, which serves the ego by coordinating the functions of the senses and faculties. It sifts, sorts, labels, and classifies the masses of external sensory data received according to parameters set by Ahamkara ego. So again, Manas is the thinking mind, and it serves the ego by coordinating the functions of the senses. So again, this is the body mind. It coordinates the body, it coordinates the senses. It sorts, sifts, labels, classifies all the sensory data received. So everything you touch, taste, smell, all that stuff that I just named, the different organs of action, the organs of reception and knowledge, all the five senses, all that stuff is organized, labeled, classified by Manas, right? All that data received, it's classified according to the parameters set by the ego. So it goes into different boxes of this is good, this is bad, I enjoy this, I don't enjoy this hurts, this feels good. Ahamkara ego makes those parameters. Manas puts them in the parameters. That's why I keep saying Manas can say, remember you went to this restaurant and when you got the fish you got sick and threw up. Do we want to get it again? Not implying that it was good or bad. All it does is just has a memory of the data, but it's the ego that enjoys it or doesn't enjoy it, and is executive, like she said up here, the executive power. It's ego that says, let's do it, let's not do it, let's move towards pleasure, let's run away from pain. And this is the level that the massive majority of the human race is ruled by. It's very difficult to not be ruled by it because this is all we know. Remember, Buddhi, the great mind, the higher self, is translogical and abstract. We're not used to thinking that way. We're not used to that being our primary mode of existence. So it does take work and faith and trust to operate on that higher level, right? It's not something that just anybody can just suddenly do. It takes practice to do that. But first, you have to recognize what's currently happening. You got to see where you are before you can move to anywhere else, right? So Manas is the thinking mind, the linear mind. It coordinates all the data from the five senses, all the different data from the five senses. And Ahamkara says this is good, this is bad, and puts it in these categories according to pleasure and pain. It also serves as the forum for decision-making processes. So again, Manas doesn't make the decisions. It just presents the data. It's the ego that executes the decisions, right? Working closely with the translogical Buddhi intellect, again, according to a format determined by the ego. So the ego does have a lot of sway here, right? If the ego's in charge, it can... a good way to put this is almost like maybe like the company. A massive company was founded by the original founder, but he's starting to get old. So he hires a new CEO to make the decisions. You may have seen like TV shows and movies where like the new CEO stops listening to the owner and starts doing what he wants. And it's like the owner's there and he tries to say wisdom and speak wisdom, but the new CEO thinks he knows it all, thinks he wants to run the show, and pretty much drives things into the ground until he has to come to the older guy for wisdom. And that's a lot how our experience works. The ego is almost like the new kid on the block who doesn't have the wisdom, but he's in the driver's seat. And, it would behoove him to listen to the wisdom and knowledge of the elder. But, like all young folks, ego thinks it knows it all. Very interesting. Very interesting. A lot of stuff going on here. Oh, look, we're at 72 likes. Goetia time. I might have need to crack open the Goetia again. I got something that needs to be handled. Thanks for the reminder. Caesar says, thank you for being the best man. I mean that. You are awesome. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate that. Okay, so we're almost done. We're wrapping it up here, talking about the internal instrument. We've also got an external instrument, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the internal instrument. So let's wrap this up here. 2 hours and 43 minutes of very crucial, valuable information, almost 3 hours. But yeah, you can just take this right here and really start to make changes that would point you towards self-evolution, if that's what you want. If you're here just for entertainment, then hey, that's fine too. At least this infotainment has the subtle aspect of transforming you on a subconscious level. So either way, you're going to experience growth. I appreciate you guys who've been here from the beginning and are watching. I appreciate you guys who've been here for the past couple of days with me as we've been studying this stuff. You guys are the real super troopers. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. That's why I keep coming back, because I love doing this, and it's really cool to see that you guys enjoy it as well. I like this. It's very fun. So, changing spiritually. This particular book is called Awakening the Life Force. All right, so let's continue. So, Manas, thinking mind, serves the ego by coordinating the functions of the senses. It sorts, labels, and classifies the masses of external sensory data received according to the parameters set by the ego. It also serves as the forum for decision-making processes, working closely with the trans-logical Buddhi intellect, again, according to the format determined by the ego, drawing memory data from the intellect as necessary and formulating that data into sets of pros and cons upon which the Buddhi intellect will make the final judgment, right? So Buddhi is like the founder of the company who's really old. Ego is like the new CEO, is the young guy, and he has the very real potential to just take over and not listen. But he also has the potential to sit back and take wisdom from, source of wisdom. And in a situation like that, the whole machine will run a whole lot smoother. And then you've got Manas, which is like the what do you call the people? They gather all the data. They're like the scientists, the accountant. He's bringing all the numbers. He's bringing all the data. This is what's happening out here on the market. Da 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 da. So memory data from the intellect is necessary, and formulating that data into sets of pros and cons upon which the Buddhi intellect will make the final judgment. So ultimately, Buddhi does make the final judgment, but Ahamkara, depending on whether it's Rajasic or Tamasic, remember from the last book, taught with Shuddhi, depending on whether it's Rajasic or Tamasic, will get in the way or not get in the way, right? So the first three spin-offs of Prakriti, Buddhi intellect, Ahamkara ego, and Manas mind, formed the threefold instrument of cognition called the internal instrument, or ANTAHKARANA. So in this particular book, he doesn't group chitta with the internal instrument, right? Taught with Shuddhi, she does. This one he doesn't. So that's the subtle difference. That's why he described chitta a little bit differently, as Riley Dawson pointed out. So even like he says right here, in some texts, chitta, individual consciousness, is considered the fourth element of this inner organ, its silent partner, that witnesses its activity and empowers it through the divine energy of prana, or the life force. Because prana is considered to be an indissoluble aspect of chitta, individual consciousness, radiating from it like sunlight from the sun, energizing all the components of the microcosm, prana is not a product of prakriti. So that's what kind of separates chitta from the rest, is that chitta is energized and radiates prana, and prana is a foreign element. It is not from prakriti. Prana is beyond prakriti. Thus, it is usually not mentioned within the hierarchy of the tattva categories. The internal instrument is the inner psychic shell that closely overlies the Purusha, or the Atman, in the form of the chitta, individual consciousness. Therefore, it assumes a powerful and commanding position in relation to the other later derivatives of Prakriti. The internal instrument forms the innermost center of our conditioned individual personality, governing all of our psychomental processes. Through this internal vehicle, which labels and biases all perceived or recollected data according to our conditioned likes and dislikes, our experience of life is formed. Amar, greetings, bro. Greetings. It is said that the deeply conditioned internal instrument controls an individual much more than an individual can ever control it. Let me read that again for those of you who might have thought otherwise. It is said that the deeply conditioned internal instrument, ANTAHKARANA, controls an individual much more than an individual can ever control it. We talk about free will, right? That is the reason why it is able to obscure our true inner nature and makes us undertake the hallucinatory role of being involved in life's absurdities. Check that out. Being involved in life's absurdities is actually a hallucinatory role. It is through this internal instrument that the inherently free soul is initially drawn into a relationship of illusionary identification with the tragic comedy of life. Tragic comedy. Very good information. Very good information. Very good information. But I think the importance of this is really summed up by what Sister Satya Sanganandi said in Tatwashuddhi, right? And what she said was, she said that the intellectual supremacy of man does not in any way complement the full potential of the Antakarana. It is just a mere glimpse of the power that it contains. If the performance of this instrument reaches its full capacity, man can not only control the inferior creations of nature, but also the latent forces within himself, which have the inherent power to create, preserve, and destroy. Thus, he would become a co-creator, or an instrument, one with nature, replicating her cosmic processes. The yogis who have attained the power to do so achieve this rare feat by exploring the mysteries of this inner instrument, the Antakarana. Right? So basically what she's saying is, when you do pay close attention to this Antakarana and you start to get towards its full capacity, you transcend being under the influence of the gunas. You transcend being under the influence of the gunas, and you're able to control the inferior creations of nature. You're also able to access the latent forces within yourself, right? And those latent forces, they have the inherent power to master the gunas, the inherent power to create, preserve, and destroy, right? So you stop being under the influence and effect of nature, and you become a wielder of nature, right? Remember, the lower three aspects of mind of the inner instrument are under the influence of Rajas, Sattva, or Tamas in proportion. But when you're able to reach the Buddhi stage, the higher self stage, it is translogical, and it is also transcendental, meaning it's beyond the influence of the gunas. This is why when you work within the higher realms and the higher planes, you're able to affect reality, because it's a trickle-down effect. It's a trickle-down effect. If you're able to influence the subtle nature of matter, then it manifests into the dense nature, right? It starts subtle and it gradually gets more and more and more dense. The higher that you're able to work and influence things, the wider the scope and range of your ability. This is why siddhis are unlocked. When you start doing meditations like Tatwashuddhi, siddhis are unlocked because you're operating in a realm that is transcendent of the gunas, transcendent of the elements. You're working at such a subtle plane, such a subtle plane. Absolutely amazing. I love it. I love it. Amar asks, if it is an instrument, how is one to play it given what you just read? Honestly, I mean, it's like playing any other instrument. How do you play the guitar? Like when you look at it, you see a bunch of frets and a bunch of strings. And if you have no knowledge of what's going on, you really can't play it. It's going to sound terrible. No matter how good your intentions are, no matter how you dress, you might dress like a full-on rock star, but if you look at that instrument, you don't understand it, you're not a rock star, right? You can take pictures with it, pretend, But when it gets down to doing the work, you have no thing to show for yourself. So to play the instrument, you got to study the instrument. You got to study and you have to practice, right? You got to practice the instrument. So I study the notes, I study the frets, I study the strings. Okay, I know that the top string is more dense, so they're going to be the lower notes there. I know the bottom string is very thin, very subtle, so that's the high notes. I notice that the frets are in a specific order, and I learn my scales. I know that I can hit this note and it's in the scale. This note is not in the scale. And the more that I study, just the framework of it, now as I practice putting the different notes into play, I can start to learn different songs, right? And as I learn different songs, I learn composition. Now, composition of music has nothing to do with the guitar physically. You can only deal with the composition of the music once you learn the mechanical operation of the guitar. Now we start getting to how to put it all together, right? So we start by learning the mechanical aspect. Then we start learning how it works together, the relationships with it. Then as we learn more and more songs, we start to intuitively learn how to play by ear. But that only playing by ear and being very talented, like to do solos and do these runs and go up and down the guitar, that only happens after so much study of the mechanical aspect of it, which is learning the names and learning the relationships, and then learning the theory of it, the theory and the practice, just like playing an instrument, just like playing a sport, just like anything else in nature dealing with using our minds. In order to play the instrument, we've got to study and practice, theory and practice. We got to play with it. We have to analyze it, observe it, and learn its different functions. And then we have to learn how it operates with itself and how it operates with its environment. And once we're able to do that, we can call ourselves a skilled guitarist or a pianist or a yogi or whatever we want to call ourselves. Beautiful, beautiful. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, so yeah, I think that was a pretty comprehensive explanation and breakdown of this 4-part tool, right? The ANTAHKARANA, the inner tool, the inner instrument, which consists of the Buddhi, or your highest intellect. That's the closest that you'll have to your higher self. Ahamkara, ego, which is the executive decision maker. I mean, ultimately, the Buddhi is the executive decision maker, but this is like the owner and founder of the company. This is like the new CEO, the young guy. Manas is in control of the data. It collects the data of the body, the 5 senses, all that stuff. It collects the data. It knows that spaghetti is delicious. It knows that you're allergic to milk. It doesn't know enough to say, let's not drink the milk. It just has that data stored. It's Ahamkara that says, when I drink the milk, I have to fart and have diarrhea. It doesn't feel good, so I'm going to avoid it. That's what the CEO does. And ultimately, it's Buddhi that says, you know what? Because we're lactose intolerant, we're going to cut dairy out of our diet altogether so that we can be more healthy, right? Now, it may say that, and these other guys might not hear it, but they're going to start to kind of pick up on, maybe I should stop dairy products from my diet. Maybe I should cut that out. Ego didn't come up with that. Buddhi came up with that. You see what I'm saying? So this is a relationship that works together. And then chitta, that deals more with the conscious mind. That deals more with the stored memories that we have and the reactions to those memories, right? It has a lot more to do with dealing with prana, directly interacting with prana. So when all these different levels of mind are balanced and working in harmony with itself, it can begin to transcend being influenced by rajas or tamas, right? Ego under the influence of tamas is self-doubting, negative self-talk. You're beating up on yourself. You're making it hard on yourself because you're accessing memories and data of pain from your past. That's what you're used to. So a tamasic ego is doing that. A rajasic ego is scatterbrained, monkey mind jumping everywhere. It's dissipated. It doesn't finish what it starts. It doesn't do what it says it's going to do. It's so scattered and so all over the place that it's almost powerless. Now, a sattvic ahamkara, a balanced, harmonious ego, listens to Buddhi and intuitively operates in a harmonious fashion with its external and internal environment. Okay, so that is that. That is that. I hope you guys got some good clarification on these concepts, because this is really important. When they say know thyself, you know what I'm saying? This is how you know thyself. You know the different individual parts that make up yourself. It is insufficient to just say conscious mind, subconscious mind. That's insufficient. This knowledge here allows us to get a little bit deeper and a little bit more detailed so that we have something to work with and we understand what we're doing, right? So let me know in the chat if this has resonated with you. Let me know if this gives you some encouragement. Let me know if this gives you something to work with, so you're not just out here scattered and whatever. Let me know if this was good. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and let me know if you would like to see more of this. Because this can change your life. It really can. Sometimes just knowing better allows you to do better. Just knowing better allows you to do better. And I know for me, this stuff has allowed me to know better and to do better. So yeah, I hope that it does the same for you. Hope that it does the same for you. Okay, so Sunday, join us as we talk about the second chapter of this book, The Passive Poverty and Nivriti. If you don't have this book, last night I read the second chapter, so you can follow along with that. Hopefully you do have this book and you can highlight your favorite parts and bring it up in discussion on Sunday, because that's what the whole book study group is about. I want to know what you guys have gotten from the information, right? What did you get from the text? What did you get from this info? All right. And also, if you want some direct training, some direct guidance, some direct information on how to work with all this stuff, I will be opening my class, Inner Light Activation System, for its second round in February. All right, so I'll be promoting that a little bit more. But if you are interested in getting some direct training on how to work with the inner aspects of self so that you can actually create a connection, so that you can actually become aware of the connection with your higher self and have a framework of actually doing different meditations and practices that help you, bring yourself forward, then hit me up about the course. Contact me about the course. All right. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I enjoy this most definitely. And study and practice. Study and practice. That's how you shape this inner instrument. That's how you get better at playing and working with this instrument. Study and practice. Study and practice. Study and practice. All right. So I'm out of here. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for spending time with me. Thank you for, just being interested in this. It means the world to me. I really enjoy this. I'm going to be doing this forever, really. Past me being in this body, I'm still going to be doing this because this is literally what I'm here to do. I'm going to keep doing it. So I hope that you are positively impacted. All right. See you guys tomorrow. Peace. Oh, wrong side. Oh, cool. You can see the reflection. That's awesome. Nice. Okay, having too much fun. Time to go. Time to go.